welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Thursday, September 29th, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with some incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then, Alan will speak with Amit Saxena, Vice President and General Manager of Automation Engine at ServiceNow, and Tom Freeman, Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager at ServiceNow. In this interview, they will discuss the launch of Automation Center in ServiceNow's latest Now Platform Tokyo release. Then, Vittoria will speak with Vadim Ogievetsky, co-founder and CXO of Imply, about the launch of Imply's Project Shapeshift 2 and how their technology features Apache Druid, the most capable, flexible, real-time database in the industry. Then, Mike will talk with Sasha Laboure, Chief Strategy Officer at CloudBees, and Sean Ahmed, Chief Marketing Officer at CloudBees, about how the acquisition of a Release IQ will provide more visibility and control across multiple DevOps workflows. Mike will then interview Anuj Kapoor, CEO at CloudBees, and Tim Johnson, Director of Product Marketing at CloudBees, to dive into how DevSecOps needs to evolve to reduce friction between developers and cybersecurity teams. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on and tell us more about some of the upcoming webinars. We are then going to head over to Mitch, where he will speak with Patrick Bergstrom, CTO of Stormforge, about Stormforge's newest release, Stormforge Optimized Live. Mitch will then sit down with Guy Fletcher, co-founder and CEO of Cider Security, where they will discuss his experience as a CISO and how understanding context helps dev and security teams create a cohesive app strategy. We will follow that up with the first episode of a brand new show on Techstrong TV, Techstrong Research Review. In the inaugural Techstrong Research Review, Mike Rothman and Mitch Ashley will highlight several of the important topics in the march to continuous everything. We then have two episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike will interview Carl Sigler, Senior Security Research Manager at TrustWave Spider Labs, as Carl explains how cybersecurity penetration testing is being used for both good and bad. Mike will then interview Shiva Nathan, CEO at Onimus, as Shiva explains why the time for feature as a service has arrived. We then go to Yalla DevOps, where Alan spoke with Or Maman of Nice Systems, who works to provide DevOps for DevOps, on how DevOps teams need uniformity and how Nice Systems delivers this through a single platform. And to wrap up this broadcast, we go to Open Source Summit, where Alan met with Jonathan Leitchu, OSS security researcher for Human, to talk about vulnerability disclosures. That's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get this show started. Enjoy.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for September 29th. Earlier this week, NASA's Double Asteroid Rendezvous Test Probe, or DART, slammed into a small asteroid 7 million miles away from Earth. The goal of DART was to change the orbit of the asteroid, Dimorphos, and is being hailed as the first ever planetary defense test. The golf cart-sized spacecraft hit Dimorphos at a speed of 14,000 miles per hour. While Dimorphos is classified as a potentially hazardous asteroid, it poses no threat of impacting Earth in the near future. Even though the crash itself was successful, it will take some time to know if the DART probe was successful as a planetary defense test. Next up, Meta has announced that they have identified and disabled the operation of a sprawling disinformation network originating in Russia. This network sought to use thousands of fake social media accounts and fake news websites to spread Kremlin talking points about the invasion of Ukraine. Facebook has stated this is the largest and most complex propaganda effort that is found since the invasion began. Meta has also identified a smaller network coming from China that was meant to spread divisive political content in the US. While the shutdown of these networks show the effectiveness of social media at maintaining their sites, it also continues to show the threat that disinformation poses. In other news, some senators have been pushing for legislation that would limit U.S. law enforcement from buying cell phone tracking tools. Recent concerns have been from the use of a tool known as Fog Reveal, which has been used to gather records from 250 million mobile devices, as well as collect geolocation data. The tool uses advertising identification numbers to gather info on people's movements and interests. This being said, there is a secrecy around Fog, with little details on its use. Many law enforcement groups will not speak on it, raising concerns that it violates privacy. The FTC recently held a hearing on this technology and others like it that generate data through popular apps for surveillance purposes. Next, LinkedIn announced the results of a study analyzing the data of over 20 million LinkedIn users to study job success. The study spanned over 5 years and used a practice known as A/B testing that offered different contact recommendations and then analyzed the new jobs that emerged from them. Research finding from the study supports the theory known as the strength of weak ties, which says that it's the weak ties that can lead to better job opportunities. However, users were not made aware that their data was being studied, but LinkedIn says that the results will improve job mobility overall. Earlier this week, a prototype all-electric plane took its first flight. The plane itself was built to carry 9 passengers and up to 2 pilots and uses 21,500 small battery cells to provide power. While the flight only lasted for 8 minutes, it's a big step forward for all-electric planes. If the Federal Aviation Administration eventually certifies it to carry passengers, it would become the first all-electric commercial airplane. On Container Journal, we have an article that highlights the result of a report which reveals the true cost of container security breaches. Sysdig recently released a report that showed for every dollar cybercriminals make through crypto mining, the victim pays $53. That means that an $8,000 attack could cost upwards of $400,000. The report also gives an in-depth look at other effects of crypto mining. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. On DevOps.com, we have an article looking at CloudBees' recently acquisition of a Release IQ. CloudBees said that Release IQ will provide more visibility and control over software delivery on an end-to-end basis. While CloudBees already has a tool within its continuous delivery platform, Release IQ uses a SaaS platform that is more accessible. To learn more about the details of this acquisition, go to DevOps.com. Finally, on Digital CXO, we have a Leadership Insights video where we interview Hypertrack CEO Kashyap Diora on supply chains. This video takes a look at the complexity of modern supply chains and how best to manage them. To watch the video, go to digitalcxo.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. We've been doing a lot of coverage over the last couple of days around the new major new release on the ServiceNow platform called Tokyo. If you haven't watched already, my colleague Mitchell Ashley, CTO, principal researcher here at Techstrong, did a great interview with ServiceNow that gives kind of a broad overview of all of the goodies chalked into Tokyo. I did another interview with my friend Vasant, GM of the Risk and not GRC, ES. I'm going to ask Amit to help me because I forgot the initials of it's Risk, and then is it ESG?
It's Environmental, Social, and Governance Management. So
yes,
ESG. Yes.
Please, after you're done watching this, or before you want to watch this, go check those out. But continuing our coverage, I want to introduce you to two gentlemen here. First is Tom Freeman. Tom has been on Techstrong TV before. He's kind of the designated demo guy, and Tom's going to be doing a demo later on here as part of what we have in store for you. But the kind of star of our interview today is, and I hope I don't mess this up, Amit Sasina. Say it for me anyway. Saxena. Okay. Amit, welcome.
Well, thank you for being here, Alan. Good to be here.
Yep. So, Tom, I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself when we get to the demo portion of the interview. But Amit, if you don't mind, why don't you give people a little bit of your background?
Oh, absolutely, Alan. So I've been here with the service now for a good about 7 months, and I'm leading the portfolio of automation engine, which includes robotic process automation RPA, integration, and document intelligence, which is a part of the ITP.
Yep. And of course, in releases past, we've talked about RPA and we've talked about value stream and a lot of the great stuff in here. But in Tokyo, we have like a new star is born. Why don't you talk to us about it?
Indeed. Tokyo is very exciting for ServiceNow customers, right? And I think, Alan, we listen to our customers carefully. In fact, not only all the pain points, but we try to figure out what is stopping them from scaling their automation programs. And recently, in fact, the IDC CEO survey, which was conducted this year, 95% of CEOs are pursuing that digital-first strategy. It's becoming a reality. And according to Velar Research, the reason they are doing it is simply because the companies who are investing in digital first are seeing twice the revenue growth. And that's where the Tokyo release comes in, right? We are giving our customers exactly what they've been asking for, navigating those complex business challenges across all the industries, accelerating those business models in a way which is easy to implement. Of course, good for the people so that employees are happy at the end of the day. And it's good for the company, top line and bottom line cost savings. So good for the profits.
Absolutely. You know something, Amit? I apologize. I didn't give you a chance, though, to introduce kind of what's your role at ServiceNow and so forth. I know, well, we did a little bit, but we didn't formally use your title. And in case people, I know it's on the bottom third that people see, but I kind of feel we left that out. Why don't you give people your title?
No problem at all, Alan. So I'm General Manager and VP of Products here at ServiceNow, and a part of the Creative Workflow team. And me and my team is leading the set of innovations around what we are calling it hyper automation set of technologies, right? So it's a combination of automation engine combined with app engine, combined with document intelligence and RPA. So that's...
Now I love it. Good. Okay. Now, I'm sorry. I feel like the world is back in order. So we have Automation Center in Tokyo. Actually, it's funny. The Tokyo release went out. I guess that was, well, people are seeing this after we recorded it, obviously. But the Tokyo release, if I'm not mistaken, went out on Wednesday. And then the Automation Center release went out a day after, correct?
Yeah, I think there are just so many countless innovations available with our Tokyo release. Just to name the few, enterprise asset management, environmental, social, and governance management, manager hub, admin center, ServiceNow Vault, which is protecting the business from the premium platform privacy and security, issue resolution and automation center. So we are just spanning out these various releases across 2 days. That way customers get a chance to be able to pay attention to this.
Okay. So Automation Center, big piece here of Tokyo, and probably, one of the parts that are near and dear to you, Amit. Talk to us. What is that about?
Yeah, so as we've been talking to C-level execs, as we have been talking to the people who've been managing multiple automation center of excellences, one of the things which is constantly emerging, Alan, is how do I manage this large automation landscape across my company? How do I manage that automation sprawl? And Alan, you've been covering this space for so long, so you know so many automation technologies out there, right? So with that in mind, what we did is we are launching an automation center as a part of our ServiceNow Tokyo release. And this is enabling the right and unified visibility so that every organization can maximize the value of the automation deployments. And the reason for that is many of organizations who invested time into automation, they're struggling with this islands of automation, multiple disconnected point of automation tools, which are spread across departments, and this leading to this fragmented oversight. And it's kind of a disjoint view of automation opportunities because every automation tool has its own dashboard. So as a result, the COE team is never able to fully realize the automation goals. They're not able to see the big picture across all the vendors, across all the automation technologies. And this is where automation center comes in. We're not only empowering the whole center of excellence team, but the overall IT team with a complete visibility of organizations, hyper automation or intelligent automation landscape. So you can see a central view of vendor agnostic way of looking at all the cost savings across your organization. So that's the beauty of Automation Center.
You know, Amit, this is great. Sometimes, though, a picture's worth 1,000 words. What do you think?
Absolutely. So for that, let me bring one of our demo gurus, Tom Freeman, and let's look at this automation center, and then I can come and talk about some of the specific innovations which are included in that. So Tom, let's take a look at a product.
Let's do it.
Excellent.
All righty.
Well, Tom. Excellent, Tom. You had it all queued up. That's great.
Yeah, I'm always ready to rock out, and especially when it comes to automation.
Dude. Okay.
Yeah, no question about it. So what we've got here is Automation Center. As Amit said, it's one of the flagship capabilities coming out in ServiceNow's Tokyo release. But before we dive into all the cool bells and whistles we have here on our various dashboards, let's put ourselves in the shoes of an automation initiative as it traverses the full life cycle from the initial ideation portion all the way to deployment. And that's really kind of the heart and soul of Automation Center, is that it unifies these various fragmented, what we call islands of automation for our customers, but it also helps them manage the entire life cycle of automation. So with Automation Center, we have two awesome ways that folks can get started. And they get started with the concept we call automation requests. So the first one here is leveraging our service catalog technology. So you'll see this is a familiar user interface for many of our customers. It's what we call Employee Center Pro. And within Employee Center, what they can do is leverage a very simple form to start thinking about the automation that they want to bring to life. Now, this is really, really helpful for our customers because what it does is allows the people that are closest to their day-to-day activities, the folks that are actually, seeing these visceral opportunities for automation. It gives them the opportunity to start thinking like an automation engineer and just outline some of these key details about what they see as an opportunity. So this is option number one. You can just submit a form and basically ask for some help. Ask the Automation Center of Excellence or ask your IT team to help support you with automation. The other opportunity we have to get started with Automation Center is to use our process mining capability that we call process optimization. So in this tool, we have the opportunity for analysts to review process, and they can take a look at our out-of-the-box workflows. They can even use this to assess the efficacy of our custom low-code applications. But what's awesome is that as they're reviewing a process, if they see a big piece of lag in here, they see like a large amount of human latency between two steps, what they can do is automatically leverage an integration that we have to open up an automation request that will then flow into Automation Center. So whether it's coming from a flash of inspiration or whether an individual is having a really data-oriented, structured approach, they can open up what we call these automation requests. These all flow into Automation Center. Now, we can take a look at a particular automation request here to get a better understanding of what this really means. And what it basically provides is a starting point for a kind of an automation to start providing value back to the business. You get all the detail that the individual entered from either one of those two entry mechanisms that I just shared. But importantly, you have the opportunity to align your automation to business goals, and you can outline expected cost savings and expected time savings. Now, this really allows you to baseline your expectation around automation and ensure that it's really providing the ROI you expect back to the business. This also unifies all the activity that revolves around automation because you have all the tasks associated with these automation and all the resources that'll be doing the development all in one place. So you can really keep your life nice and sane. Now, we have the ability to manage more than just requests in here. You have all of your robots in here as well. You have the bot processes, which are basically the jobs that those robots will be running. And you've got the ability to manage a variety of different automation sources. Now, this is one of the cool parts, is you can manage ServiceNow's robotic process automation and third-party automation as well. So it's not just for ServiceNow. Now, if we dig into a particular bot process, you'll see one of the other unique differentiators here for our solution, which is the ability to leverage our best-in-class configuration management framework. So we call this CMDB. And basically what this means is that the automation will be a configuration item equivalent to any other aspect of infrastructure in a customer's environment. So now what they can do is leverage all sorts of our out-of-the-box capability, like our change management approach and our incident management approach, but they can also use our cool dependency mapping software to see a clear topology of the way in which their automation lines up to infrastructure that they're dependent upon and software that they actually leverage. So this is really cool because in the past, automation would be kind of floating out in the ether, and you kind of cross your fingers sometimes hoping that it works. If someone upgrades downstream software, they may not know that your automation is dependent upon it, and vice versa. And so what we have now is the ability to proactively understand, if there's a change request coming or a maintenance window for my Windows server, I can make sure that I know about that outage for my automation. If I know that my ERP application is going to get upgraded, I can do some proactive testing for my automation to ensure it works with that new version. So as you can see, it really provides a holistic way to manage automation and bring it together from any different aspect of the business. And using these dashboards that we saw in the beginning, we now have an opportunity to take a look at the value it's bringing back. So you can see, we can understand the value that the automation is bringing to the business in terms of what's already been achieved. We can see what's on track, and then we can see areas of opportunity. As we scroll down, we can see kind of the active automations that are running and the cost savings and time savings they're bringing back to the business. And importantly, we can see all these future automations, the potential that your team's been servicing through that web form or through process optimization. And what's cool is you can see it split out by organization. So you can understand the departments that maybe you could use a little more support in leveraging your automation capabilities. Now, if we go to the final screen here, executions, we'll see all the detail admins are going to love. You're going to see job summary, incident summary around your active automations. And this will let you keep that proactive perspective on your automation to make sure things are running smoothly. And importantly, you can keep an eye on to the dependent business applications. So if any changes are coming down the pipe, you can stay ahead of them. Lastly, we have a bit of AI and ML driven capability under the hood. We have automatic insights. So these will surface to let you know if something should, catch your attention. You should maybe be aware of it before it causes an issue with your automation. And we also have urgent take action insights that are going to let you know when there are resource dependencies or major concerns that are really actively impeding your automation. So as you can see, Automation Center really brings together a lot of capabilities here. It unifies those those islands of automation that pretty much every business out there has to deal with. It allows our customers to manage the full life cycle of automation, and it provides transparency into the value and these KPIs that are associated with your automation. So with that, Alan and Amit, back to you.
Fantastic. Good stuff, Tom. As always, you are the king of demos.
Thanks, Alan.
That's a very impressive, as usual, great interface, great UX design from ServiceNow. But really, it's beyond just, hey, it's another application. There's some great functionality here. I always find, the best way to demonstrate beyond doing a demo, the best way to bring it home is to bring it into real world, real life, real customer situations. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to talk about, the way some ServiceNow customers are using this or will be using it.
Yeah, we actually had a huge pipeline for customers in our design. So one of the things my team does is we run a design partnership program, Alan. What that means is we give a preview of something which is going live. So even though this is coming out right now, we have more than 14 customers lined up. They've been looking at it, providing feedback and part of our design partner program, and they cannot wait to get their hands on this GA version of the product. Because as you see, you know, there's teams in this customer sites, Alan, who've been doing automations for years and decade. And this is the first time those teams themselves are getting an automation technology for their own use. And that's what is powerful about it, is Automation Center is for those COE teams to be able to make their day and week and month better in managing the whole pipeline of automations coming in, able to view centrally what automations worth pursuing, and able to pre-detect instead of being reactive, proactive about what automations may fail so that they can take those measures to avoid the downtime with the overall execution dashboard. So a lot of interesting things built in. We are hoping our automation COE teams and any automation teams in general is going to find a lot of value with Automation Center.
I love it. I love it. Real world experiences? Anything you could share?
Yes. There are one large manufacturer we've been working with, and then another large scale SI company, a global SI company. Now, these guys have a huge army of automation COE where they are getting thousands of intakes of automation opportunities coming in. At the same time, what is interesting thing, as Tom was demonstrating you, it's easy to fill out a form, Alan, and say, hey, this is what I need. But wouldn't it be great if our process mining tool automatically detects what is the area you need to be automating? And that's the beauty of this. It detects it. You can create an automation opportunity into Automation Center. You can use our portfolio of RPA, integration, low-code apps to be able to address that. So that overall life cycle is what these large manufacturer team, this large system integrator is very excited about. And the second thing which Tom was talking to and alluding to is our tie-in to what we do the best, which is our configuration management database. So all the automations we built using our robotic process automations, they also connect back to that configuration item, which ServiceNow ecosystem understands really well. And the advantage of that is any change management which is happening in coming weeks and coming months, it will automatically flag it to the central dashboard that you may see in potential downtime, so you may want to do something about it. That way you can proactively avoid that automation from not running. So a lot of excitement in our customer data in general about this functionality.
I love it. Excellent stuff. Guys, we're over time. It was supposed to be 15 minutes, and we kind of blew through that real quick. Tom, well, wait, before we wrap up, Amit, people who want to maybe check it out, right? I know how ServiceNow works. It's a platform. Everything on Tokyo platform is available to ServiceNow customers. But for people who maybe aren't ServiceNow customers today, but saw this and maybe want to be, where should they be going?
Well, we have a Tokyo page with all these innovations available on ServiceNow.com. And specifically, one of those innovations talks about Automation Center. So that brings all the things you saw from Tom, a video as well, and all the feature sets and capability of our automation engine and Automation Centers included on a single place, Automation Center page on our ServiceNow.com. That will be a great place to get started.
Fantastic. Tom, I want to thank you as always for doing a great job on demos, right? It's more than people think, just being able to do a real demo, right? And so I appreciate it. Start getting ready for the next one. Amit, it's always a pleasure to have you on. excellent work here with Tokyo. We're looking forward to seeing how the market kind of picks up on this and some of the interesting things that come out of Automation Center with it. You can check it all out on servicenow.com and go check out the Tokyo page from there. Guys, thank you very much. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV, and we'll be back in a moment.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, I'm here with Techstrong TV. Victoria, I'm the host, and I'm very excited to talk to you, Vadim, today and get to know you a little bit more. So, start by introducing yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vadim Ogieveski. I'm the co-founder of Imply, and I've been working with databases and with Apache Druid specifically for, I think, over 10 years now, since the project began.
Wow, that's amazing. And I see that you're a Stanford graduate too in computer science. That's so cool. You're about to launch a second part of the product. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, so we're right now doing we kind of have our long-standing project this year called Project Shapeshift, which is just to transform and enhance the capabilities of Druid in our system in many, many ways. And one of the right now we're announcing Shapeshift Milestone 2, which is kind of like the second part of the saga. And one of the really exciting things is that we just released the Apache Druid 24, which comes with a whole bunch of cool new features, including SQL-based ingestion that you can now ingest and transform your data inside of Druid using the same SQL as you use to query the database.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I'm really into data too. So that's very cool that you guys are innovating, I guess, like the database market. What do you feel like this technology will bring like to developers?
Well, so the reason that people pick Apache Druid fundamentally is because they want to make analytic applications. So if somebody is like running some business and they want to either build an internal application to like analyze how it's performing, like look at all the metrics and stuff like that, or if they want to give out an analytic application to their users to kind of be a value add of like how are you what are your users doing? How is everything going in your application? The Apache Druid is the database for that. So fundamentally, what Druid does is it lets you run all of these queries, and it can handle petabytes of data. So scan as much data as you want, and then give you pop quick answers to my top this, my top that, how many unique users I have doing this, how many, basically anything that you care to ask. And
no, I love that. That makes sense. It's basically, in my understanding, it's really good for marketing too, because now you have all this data that you can give to your marketing team and say, hey, our users are doing this or that, kind of, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, you can give it to your marketing team, you can give it to your product team, you can give it to anybody really. I think a great case study that really resonates with people just because it's a popular product is Netflix, the video streaming service. They use Druid for their internal analytics, and they distribute it to everybody in their team, like all of their decisions about which shows to promote, which regions receive the best quality of the streaming content, all of that is whether it's DevOps, engineering, or marketing, they're all kind of making decisions based on this data that's enjoyed. And but I bring them up as an example, both because it's kind of like a household name, but also because on their engineering side, they're very vocal and they have a great blog. So if you just Google Netflix Druid, you'll get a lot of interesting, solid content on their engineering blog about exactly what they're doing.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing. And that makes sense because, they do have a lot of data that they need to handle. And I'm actually really loving getting to know your this product. I think it's super interesting. Can I ask you one thing? In terms of like scalability, does that help? How does that work too, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of Druid's key features is that we kind of have the scalability story really nailed. So Druid is a distributed system, which means that fundamentally it takes your data and it splits it up across multiple computers, and then it like all of them work together to serve your queries. Now, one of the awesome things about Druid, kind of like one of the reasons people really enjoy using it, is that if you if you need to like scale by a factor of 2, because suddenly you have like twice as, like your app has gone viral or something and you have twice as many users as you had last week, or you like onboarded a big customer and now you have like twice as much data because you're just like growing like crazy.
Yeah.
You just do twice as many servers and it will Druid will kind of redistribute the load and the the queries to these servers as like by itself. And that makes for a property where you can really predict how it's going to scale and how it's going to work. And that is Druid kind of the Druid project, which it's open source, you can download it and you can play with it. And
Nice.
at Imply, as part of our offering, we actually have a product called Polaris, which is a managed Druid service where we take care of that for you behind the scenes. So you don't even have to worry about it.
Nice. So is this, let's say, so I guess this product, do you think it's like good for any type of business, like small? I guess you kind of answered that because you did say, let's say my business blows up on TikTok and I'm having all these people hitting my website or product. You said that it will handle that, right? So I guess you kind of answered that.
Yeah, I mean, our databases for businesses that are big or expect to be big.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
if you're just building an app from the ground up, Druid is a great choice because you never know when you are. I mean, you should plan for success, basically, right? Otherwise, why are you building? Why are you building whatever you're building?
Of course, yeah. You're planning to scale.
Yeah.
So I have a question. When is this next feature being launched?
So this was actually launched on Friday.
Awesome!
Several days ago, and it's available for download now. And we're just kind of shouting it from the rooftops right now. There's a number of other things that were launched, and as part of those features became available in Apache Druid, which it's an open source project. You can just download the distribution. So on Friday, the download link went live, and it's also available as part of our managed service and Imply.
Oh, okay, awesome. And for Imply right now, my question is, what is the next moves for you're the co-founder of the company? How does the future look for Imply?
Yeah. So the future, one of the things I mentioned is that we built one of the cool capabilities that you can do with Druid. Just to be clear, at Imply, we see Druid as being completely core to what we do, and we kind of when I hear you say what's the future of Imply, to me, that's basically completely intertwined with what's the future of Druid.
Right.
So I'm going to answer the question first, what's the future of Druid? And then I can say what we're going to build on top of that imply.
Yeah.
So for Druid, we launched this system that can do SQL-based ingestion. Now, that's kind of like what the user sees, but under the hood, there's this multi-stage query architecture that we built to support that. And it's kind of like, it's a thing that sits inside of Druid, and it's going to start popping up all over the place in the project, where certain operations that you do will just become easier and more user-friendly to do, thanks to this internal architecture that is now in place. So the future of Druid is that we really hope to build on it, and you're going to see it in many, many more places in Druid. Right. On the imply side, what we're trying to do is we want to have as good of an experience for running a Druid cluster as possible. So, once you download Druid, you play around with it, you get convinced that this is the technology that you want to use for analytics in this app that you're building. You come to our Polaris database as a service, and it takes all the hassle away from actually managing or scaling the stuff. At the end of the day, it's as simple as it could be. It's just like an endpoint where you can send data, and then you have some APIs and also built-in visualization that you can query this data and actually learn what's going on. So we're going to be adding a lot of cool stuff built on top of this multi-stage query architecture to Druid, and then we're going to be surfacing it in Polaris in the most user-friendly way possible.
I love that. I think that, that's hearing that as a developer myself, it's so cool, because sometimes, there's people build technology that it's just not user-friendly, and it's just hard to put it all together. And it seems like you guys are really thinking about both sides, and I'm excited. I actually want to try this, this database.
Well, yeah, we're always thinking about how we can make it easier and friendlier for users, and kind of ask you to think less and just sort of do stuff for you, and have good defaults and stuff like that. One other thing that kind of really fits into that is also new in this announcement, and it's kind of almost on par with the other thing I said, but the ability to handle nested, arbitrarily complex JSON data inside of Druid natively, while not losing any performance at all. Which means that if you have the aforementioned app that you're building, you're collecting metrics. Your metrics probably have a message event on them, a message field on them that has some complex JSON object that describes what happened, and it's not under your control. It's your developers are sending it in.
Right.
Just bring it to Druid. Druid will just store it, handle it, and let you do analytics on top of that with no hesitation.
Yeah, I think I like that too, because I feel like from hearing you, it seems like you guys are also keeping the data very how can I say this? Keeping the data clean, right? I guess that's kind of a word we use. Just making sure the data is solid, because if we lose anything, you're a data guy. Data is everything nowadays. So I really like that you guys are kind of taking that step forward towards that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of our philosophies in general is, from a database perspective, the absolute worst thing that could happen is that data gets lost.
Yeah.
That is the top severity thing. That if that happens, that is drop everything and attend to that. So a lot of how we think through is, how do we make sure that never ever happens? And we build in lots of checks and balances and safeties, and make sure that your data is going to be there.
Yeah, that's super important. I mean, in today's world, for years already, it's been data is everything. They track us, all over, and then you see a pop up of that thing that you were thinking about, and you're like, how did that even happen? That's data, right? Just doing its thing, and it's so important.
Yeah, that's data, and I think there's a high likelihood that that's actually data powered by Joy. That is
really,
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That makes sense.
I mean, in my aforementioned Netflix example, if you use Netflix, they're tracking everything that you do.
Right.
Like, you pause a video, you start a video, you adjust the volume, you scrub, you change subtitle file. I mean, they're doing it so that they can know, how many people select Spanish subtitles on this video, or how many, are people in Tennessee getting like as good of a performance on their videos as the people in California, like on these servers. So it's really to make sure that you have the best experience. It's not really to sell you anything, but it's also probably for like market research, for like understanding how what people are doing. Anyhow, I don't want to extrapolate what exactly they're doing. They blog enough about it, so you should read the blogs.
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely going to read the vlogs, and I'm going to tell my friends that the FBI is not watching them. It's just you guys giving data.
Yeah, we don't actually, just to be clear for people watching, we don't imply we don't have access to that data. We just provide the database that can actually collect that data and then surface insights on top of it and analyze it. And that database is free and open source, so anybody can and is welcome. And I hope you do download it and play with it yourself.
Well, it's been awesome talking to you. I actually loved hearing about your company, and I am definitely going to play with the database downloaded this week for sure. It's so cool just learning how, there's so much innovation just being made every day. But I do have to wrap this up. Thank you for your time and for talking to us about this amazing product that you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on here.
Of course. Thank you.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Sasha Labouré, who's the Chief Strategy Officer for CloudBees, and we are joined by Sean Ahmed, who's the Chief Marketing Officer, and we're talking about their acquisition of Release IQ, a provider of an orchestration tool. I'm going to let them explain what that's all about, but Sasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Happy to be with you today.
All right. Same to you, Sean. Thanks for being
here. Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Sasha, maybe you could explain just where does this fit into the overall CloudBees strategy, since after all, you're in charge of the strategy.
That's a good point. I should know. So we're seeing a lot of organization face the need to really orchestrate a number of pipelines across the organization, and they're lacking this central way to do it in a very simple way. And so Release IQ is very interesting because it solves a number, or it has a number of characteristics that I think are extremely appealing to our customers. It is, we have this strategy at CloudBees. We talk about embrace, don't replace, right? This idea is that companies have made a number of investments, different teams have done different investments, and yet all of this needs to work together, right? In the end, you might have a back-end team, front-end team, and so on. And today they tend to be isolated, pipeline isolated teams. And it's pretty hard to both orchestrate the work across those easily, but also get a sense, visualize how those things are taking place. So Release IQ is this amazing SaaS that makes it possible to orchestrate using lots of different technologies, not just Jenkins, anything that can do pipelines pretty much in the DevOps space. And then you get to visualize all of this. It has also an easy to use front end, so low code type of user experience. So it's I'll pause there, but essentially it's a great way to orchestrate pipelines and teams.
Now, you guys already had Flow, so where does that fit in compared to this, and what is the relationship between the two, if any?
Yeah, so Release IQ is a software as a service. Flow, which is CloudBees CD, is software, and so that participates to our journey towards SaaS, where today more than 85% of our revenue still come from software. But it's clear that our customers are moving towards SaaS at their pace, and so it participates to that journey, and it makes it very easy, essentially, to get started with those unification of pipeline wherever they are. They can be existing SaaS or they can be software assets. We can do it all. So that's how it fits. And CloudBees CD tends to be also a software that has a lot of depth in a lot of the, I would say, more classic use case in the organization, right? So you can have everything from AS400 to VMs to Docker to Kubernetes, so extreme depth to automate a lot of those workloads. And Release IQ makes it very, very easy and immediate to start orchestrating workflows in the cloud. And it's also a great way to have a multi-cloud strategy, for example.
Sean, do you think that more and more of the control plane around DevOps tools is going to be shifting up into the cloud, and regardless of where the actual CI/CD platform sits, but the actual mechanism for managing the whole thing might be sitting up in the cloud more often than it is on premise over time?
I think definitely there is a movement towards the cloud. I think most organizations still continue to find themselves in a hybrid world. One in which they have to manage both their assets as software behind the firewall. Some assets are, going to be in the cloud. But you kind of have to look at that picture and kind of divide it up a little bit. It's your workloads first and foremost. It's your applications. It's your systems and processes. These are all sort of across both the cloud and behind the firewall. So when we look at an organization that needs to support any type of application, whether it might be a legacy app or a core application, whether it's more cloud native and modern applications, the key is that they need to have the flexibility to manage them as they need to without doing a ton of retooling and rebuilding everything from ground up. So the approach we see our customers take is try to manage them all together. And in that scope, I think with CloudBees, What we are able to do with Release IQ is now to address each and every one of those use cases, whether it's modern, whether it's legacy, whether it's software, whether it's cloud. They have a place to start with us, and we meet them where they are.
All right. Sasha, people have closely associated CloudBees with Jenkins over time. And so then the question becomes, what kind of company is CloudBees going to evolve into these days? Is it going to be so Jenkins-centric, or to your point, the tool, it works with other CI/CD platforms? So how should people be thinking about CloudBees these days as a company, and what is the longer-term vision?
Yeah, so Jenkins is clearly a core asset of our culture. It's a key element. A lot of things revolve around Jenkins, and Jenkins is here to stay, right? It's easy to imagine a planet without oxygen. It's a bit harder to imagine the Earth without oxygen. So I think it's hard to imagine the DevOps landscape without Jenkins. So it's here to stay, and it's doing really well. So it's core to our strategy, but it's not the only things that defined our strategy. And we've already made a bunch of moves in the last few years with feature management, with compliance, with flow, as you call it, CloudBees CD, with the electric cloud acquisition and so on. So we're a lot more than quote unquote just Jenkins, but Jenkins is definitively a key part of what we do. To that effect, if you look at Release IQ, for example, I'm very happy about what it enables, because it also makes it possible for CloudBees to further extend the type of interaction we're having with the Jenkins community, the Jenkins user base. Because typically, historically, CloudBees has been relatively focused on very, I don't want to call them sophisticated, but at least large-scale type of Jenkins deployments, right? Several thousands of developers and so on. So that's really an area where we can bring a lot of value. With Release IQ, interestingly, I think we will be able to bring value to a lot of Jenkins accounts, lots of Jenkins companies that are of very different sizes. You might have 2 Jenkins, or one for development, QA, production, so 3 Jenkins, and yet you need to orchestrate that. You need to extract insight and so on. And maybe you don't want to quote unquote migrate to CloudBees CI and normalize your environment. You just want value as is. Well, with Release IQ, you just create an account on the SaaS. Put a plugin in your Jenkins instances, and voila, in 10 minutes, you have immense values that you didn't have before. So if anything, when we do those type of moves, we're very sensitive about what it means for our Jenkins community, because it's very important to us.
Sean, how is the DevOps community evolving? And early on, everything was kind of driven from the bottom up by practitioners, and they worked on individual projects and they brought in Jenkins. Are we starting to see more C-level people getting involved because they've discovered that DevOps is kind of core to digital transformation, and there's a larger conversation starting to occur? And what does that look like?
It's a great question. Indeed, the DevOps efforts today, I think, is no longer a bottoms-only motion for practitioners. It's in fact as much a business-oriented plane of view, and its connection to the business is ever so more important. You've got C-level executives that make large amounts of investments in their DevOps efforts, whether it's tooling, the practice, whether it's the organizational aspect of it. And one of the things they struggle with a lot is to just get a view of that value stream from what we input into it, the ideas that we add, and how is it actually getting to the customer, ultimately generating and creating value. So from the aspect of just managing the value chain on a day-to-day basis of how is my software being produced, but also the next level, which is how is it generating value, is a critical question in C-level executives' mind. And this is one area where I think Release IQ does a really tremendous job, is to create essentially a value stream view above the orchestration layer, such that with very, very large amount of ease, a business user or a manager or a developer or even a C-level executive can take a look into the system and look at software being created, see it by application, see it by a team, see it by a release, and view its journey end to end very easily, and how and where that value is being released, how often it's being released, where it's being released to, and furthermore, connected to business-centric metrics, et cetera, to do more definitive analysis around the value impact it's having. And that's sort of the power of release orchestration as a use case in itself, is that once you start tying in these disparate pipelines and automations that you have in your organization, you get a real true first opportunity for C-level executives to see the value stream in a single flow, connected in such a way that you can draw value from the view in a very easy way.
All right. Sasha, speaking of that, this orchestration tool is, at least in my mind, very closely tied to continuous delivery. We have seen people do well with continuous integration. Continuous delivery has been more of a challenge and more of a struggle for a lot of organizations. How do you think this will advance that whole issue? Because it seems CD is kind of core to digital transformation these days, and there's a lot more focus on the whole issue.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think every journey is different, but it's a journey in any case. And so whatever we can do to further the path to that destination is a right step in the right direction, right? So some other organizations might have a challenge in the way they can link those different pipelines together. Well, that's great. That's exactly what release orchestration will help them achieve. Others feel like there is a lack of ownership in terms of gating the release, right? They still want to gate that process, and they feel that it's not an easy thing where they have a unified view on maybe multiple different applications. Well, that can help it. We can help her there as well, right? It might be around mastering that last mile of actual deployment, which a number of organizations haven't been able to do. Well, you can do it here. Or, we talk about cloud-based compliance. It might be because they feel like today they're doing good progress in terms of gaining velocity, but maybe there is a loss of peace of mind that organizations are suffering from. And so there is always this balance, right? I want to go faster, but not if it comes at the expense of security and peace of mind. So how do you keep those two things in check? So I think organizations need to find their own way. It doesn't, it's not just around tools. If you don't have tools, it's going to be very complicated. But if you have tools, it doesn't magically solve it. And so that's why I think with our approach, we get to come and help organization at different steps and known bottleneck along the way where typically we see heartburn take place.
Sean, Jenkins has been around for a long time, and it's been extended, and there's these tool chains that exist, and they're quite complicated in some cases. Are you seeing an effort to consolidate the tool chains a little bit, or are we still seeing developers want to be able to swap in whatever new tool they find, and they want that kind of flexibility and freedom? And so how do we balance, the need for freedom and some sense of centralization?
Yeah, that's an observation that is very good observation. And so the question, look, I think technology in general and the methods by which we're writing code, the tools that we're using, these are not slowing down. That technology landscape continues to accelerate quite a bit. New tools are popping up all the time, whether they're open source or commercial, new methodologies, new types of ways to make applications. The best tool for the job is going to continue to reign dominant, in my opinion, because developers need to be able to use the tools that they believe are the right tools to do the job, which is why it's so fundamental that you get a best of both worlds, because you want to let developers have the choice to choose the tools that they're going to use, whether it's the ops team, whether it's the developers, whether it's security teams. They have to use the right tools along the way and be able to choose the best tool for the job. So I think that continues to stay. So how do you get the best of both worlds, that centralization at the same time as freedom of choice? And that's where we think Release IQ is incredibly unique in its approach, in that, and this goes for CloudBees ethos in general, we've always been a company that embraces that tool chain instead of trying to replace and centralize it. We understand that we can connect to that and generate a tremendous amount of value for our customers to get the same outcomes that you get from centralizations without having to replace the tool chains. I think that's key to our value proposition. And the same goes with this acquisition of Release IQ. The whole concept is connect to the tools that you already have. We're not going to force you into making centralization or replacement choices in your tool chain, because we recognize. So the ease with which you connect to that tool chain, the ease with which you then orchestrate it, is superior. So you get the effects of having, a single pipeline. You get the effects of having and the impacts that you want to drive from having a single release orchestration flow and a single value stream. But you get all of that value without having to replace. And that's going to continue to be, I think, the right winning combination in the DevOps space moving forward. And I think we're poised pretty well to capitalize on that.
Sasha, there are any number of tools and they all have interesting metadata that's inside them. Is part of this whole effort some way to capture that data in a way that makes it actionable for the business versus forcing some sort of overlay on top of the process to gather that level of intelligence? Can we just pull the data that's already in the tools and find some interesting way to capture that and present that in a way that the business can go, aha, we see what's going on and we know where help is required, or we know what application is going to be delivered when and what dependencies there are?
Yeah, it's a great point. 100%. So it's sometimes confusing because it feels like by saying, oh, embrace, don't replace, we mean, oh, chaos, right? Oh, we're embracing chaos and the fact that you have 1,000 things around you. But those 1,000 things are the reality. Can you get to less chaos? Yeah, potentially. And it's always good to simplify things, but you're still going to get diversity of tools within an organization. And so no question, you're going to have that diversity. That being said, embracing doesn't mean that you cannot have a unified brain, as we like to call it, refer to it, a brain of software delivery, and capture all of that metadata to make something useful out of it. So that's absolutely what we're doing, right? So if you look at Release IQ, for example, it has this very strong data model. And independently of whatever pipeline technology you're going to be using, can be Jenkins, can be CloudBees CI, can be GitLab CI, can be GitHub Action, can be Circle CI, whatever you're going to be using, we get to capture all of those, make sense of them so you can start orchestrating. But at the same time, we capture metadata and we offer insights across those tools. And that's the beauty of it, right? It's across those different tools, because ultimately it doesn't matter. You want to know what's your velocity. You don't want to know what your velocity with that tool. Overall, what's a business impact you can reach. And when we were talking, and Sean was also talking about this control, this notion of control and peace of mind. Well, we need that same brain, that same metadata to reach those conclusions, right? Those conclusions don't come out of thin air. You actually leverage all of the data coming from those different tools to reach different conclusions. It can be our customers reaching out their own conclusion, or it can be ourselves with our own tool extracting that data for providing insights to our customers. So that data is absolutely 100% key to software delivery.
Sean, in reality, we're kind of talking about moving up in terms of DevOps maturity. Do you think as we make this shift to cloud native applications and this next generation of admittedly more complex applications to build, that will force the issue and organizations are going to have to kind of rethink their whole DevOps workflow to deal with it?
I think it'll be definitely a progression. I think for DevOps teams that are providing pipelines, providing DevOps systems, platforms, and tooling for the developers to use, they will have to continue to progressively think about the needs of the developers. I think at the end of the day, the developers are critical to the efforts. They are very much the consumers of the platform, as is the ops teams, as is the security teams, and so on in greater degrees. So the challenge of the future is going to continue to become how do we bring these teams together in such a way that they can provide value into the platform itself, but in increasing degree, how do we make it easy for developers to consume? Lots of progress to be made in that space in the next few years to come, for sure.
All right. Speaking of the next few years to come, Sasha, last question. Things are clearly getting more complex. Will AI save us from ourselves? What's real and what's not real about AI?
Look, we anytime there is a new technology, we put all kind of dreams around it and hope and so on. So as always, reality is somewhere in the middle. You remember in 2000 we're supposed to have flying cars and such. That was at least the vision from the 60s. Didn't see many of those in the last few days, and self-driving cars. If they are around the corner, they seem to be, for the most part, stuck around the corner. So, no, I'm half kidding. I actually think AI has a huge role to play in software delivery. We see some amazing things take place. It's essentially the augmented developer, right? And you get to augment developers, and that's amazing. Will it solve everything? And we can just sit down, relax, and say, I'd like an application that does X. Certainly not. But the type of augmentation it provides to developers and organization is definitively providing an inflection point to the software world. So yeah, it's amazing.
All right, Sasha, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, Sean, same as you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
All right, guys, thanks for watching, and back to you in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Tim Johnson, who's Director of Product Marketing, and the newly appointed Anuj Kapoor, CEO for CloudBees. We're talking about security and DevSecOps and the overall state of the world. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Anuj, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
Tim, you guys have a new survey talking about what it is folks are doing, where we are. We've been talking about DevSecOps forever and a day, but what is the level of progress is anybody's guess. So maybe you could clue us in on some of the results. And more importantly, what surprised you in here, if anything?
There's a lot to unpack there. DevSecOps has been around for a long time. The concept of shift left has been around for even longer. And what we're seeing as organizations progress through their DevOps journey, and you start off with maybe doing CI and then CD and then getting on to more complex pipelines and so forth. Security and its close cousin compliance have been kind of the laggards in that, and it's now getting to the point where it's a significant source of friction in organizations, preventing them from getting to that digital transformation that they're looking for. And we went out and with the survey, we asked a whole bunch of C-suite people, how does this affect your organizations? And some of the biggest things that we found is that security and compliance work is a major source, a barrier to innovation, because it slows things down. And that wasn't really that much of a surprise. I think it was a surprise at how severe it was to us in some of the numbers. And one of the other things that came back is about 80% of the respondents are doing shift left or are moving to shift left, which is, for those who aren't that familiar with it, it's do more testing, more security checks and so forth early on in the development cycle, which is the right thing to do. You catch bugs early, you fix them there, it costs a whole lot less than having your customers do your testing for you. But the problem is again, it kind of goes back to the first statistic. About 60% of those people that said that they're doing shift left are saying that it's a burden to them as well. And you have to take a step back and look at what we're asking those people to do, those developers to do early on. And there's now a whole, the batch, if you will, a huge number of security testing tools that developers are supposed to run, test people are supposed to run. So it's a whole bunch of them, and then they have to figure out what do the results mean, and then they have to try to figure out how do I prioritize my work? I have these six different security scanners coming back with all these priorities. They're different. Or whatever, we call those alert storms, because it's just burying people. And then the security and compliance people come along and say, well, you have to do this, and we're not compliant this because you have to change that, and you have to do all these other things. And it's just at the end of the day, the software delivery ecosystem is just so complex that it's beyond your developers to understand how complex it is. It's beyond your developers' skill set and actually what you're paying them for, to understand how this all works together and what is compliant and what is secure and so forth. And the effort that we see people expending on that, we call that the compliance tax, because, security and compliance work, you got to do it. Nobody wants to do it, but you got to pay for it. And it doesn't add anything to innovation. It actually gets in the way. So that's the summary of what we found from the survey.
Is it your sense that we want to shift left all the way to the developer, or are we just trying to lean left and put more guardrails into the DevOps platforms that address security issues without requiring the developers to all become security experts, because the probability assessment of that happening is almost zero?
Exactly. It's more along the lines of shifting the security and compliance everywhere into the right people at the right time, and giving them the tools and the visibility to make the right decisions. And that takes automation, and we call it shift left done right. So yes, you do have to do more testing early, but how do you take that burden off of those? How do you declaratively state for the organization what is safe and secure, and in a way that people can understand it, and it can be consumed by your automation, by your software delivery lifecycle. And then one of the other issues, especially when it comes to compliance, because somebody's got to raise their hand and say, based on the data I have, we are compliant to whatever standards you have to adhere to. Most of the effort that we see is point in time or well after the fact assessment. Let's go rebuild. Let's go look at these logs from 3 months ago. Well, we ran that security scan 2 days ago. Are you still compliant now? Right. So has anything changed? And does anything change after that particular point in time in your delivery lifecycle? And the answer is yes, it can. But do you know if it did? And so you need this, like I said, this corporate catalog of what safe and secure is. But you also need something that treats the security and compliance process holistically and in real time and continuously, right? And then take that and filter out all the noise and give people the information they need to make the right decision. So if developers say, I need to stop on this feature because I need to fix that bug, or I can delay fixing that because I need this feature, or this particular bug or this particular finding is not as important in a dev environment versus something that would hit them in production.
Michael, maybe just add to what Tim said. I think there's active debate inside most organizations as to the choice of words that you used between a shift and a lean. And a big part of that is the maturity of the organization, the risk tolerance of the organization, the capabilities of the developers, and where they stack rank in terms of regulatory scrutiny or in general sort of geographic base of operations. And that's something that I think as an industry, we're likely going to figure out, which is what's that happy medium in terms of how far back do you go? How far left do you go? Versus, does that sort of start to ultimately impede your primary goal, which is you want to basically ship production software with reasonable velocity, with high levels of security. And that balancing act, I think, is as much of a debate inside most organizations at this point. And I don't think we've arrived at a happy medium across industries that can be used as a benchmark. And I think that's in some ways what the survey also demonstrated.
All right. And usually we both have a little touch of gray going on. So we've both been around the enterprise block a few times. How is the relationship between DevOps teams and the rest of the IT team and the business is changing and evolving, especially as we start paying a lot more attention to security, compliance? All these things used to be things somebody else's job. So how is that kind of changing, and how should people be thinking about the role of DevOps?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, DevOps as a word was coined in 2009. And so, as much as we talk about it, we're sort of barely entering the second decade in terms of sort of mainstream awareness and adoption. And I was going to talk about this in my keynote in Orlando, which is, even the company that sort of came up with the slogan, move fast and break things, very quickly pivoted to move fast with stable infrastructure. And that was obviously Facebook. So this notion of velocity that is paired with operational resilience, that is paired with security, is something that is very much an evolving question inside most organizations. And that's sort of really the relationship. Vectors are changing beyond, what velocity used to be the primary KPI that everyone was targeting, to experience, to now resiliency and security. And I think those attributes change with the level of sophistication of both the dev teams and the ops teams. In a previous discussion, we were sort of talking about, do developers actually want to embrace ops? If they do they want to embrace security? Or is that being imposed upon them, right? So this notion of dev to DevOps to DevSecOps is very much an industry term, but how pervasive is it inside most organizations? I think depending on, the development teams you talk to, they will either embrace that or they will push back against that. Then you have the role of the platform teams, which are basically driving a level of standardization or level of compliance. Because the argument is that, if you do velocity at the expense of security, then you will ultimately pay for it in terms of the vulnerabilities that you're creating in production code and the debt that you're putting out there, because you're going to have multiple versions of software operating in any given environment. So I think it's a very, very live thread, honestly, inside most organizations with regards to what the line is and what the attributes are that you ultimately value. I think what's clear, though, is that the brute force attempt to embed security into the SDLC is creating significant frustration amongst the people that you have empowered to actually drive high quality and high velocity code, and that's the developers, right? The security persona inside most organizations typically has a very different caliber, very different tolerance, and sort of very different view of what the right answer is. That is not consistent with what a 25-year-old developer that just wants to basically develop this cloud-native containerized app on a serverless environment is. So I think bridging the philosophical difference as to what success looks like, and then bridging the job description evolution between all those organizations is something as an industry we need to get right. And it's going to vary between industries, between companies with different maturities within those industries, and then obviously the geographical sort of bias of your state of operations. And more importantly, just what you believe your vulnerability is that is tolerable, right? Every question about risk has to do with what is the appropriate level of risk you want to take on to be able to actually achieve the outcomes that you believe you need to drive. And that's a threshold that I think is very much in flux inside most organizations. And depending on if the headline in the Wall Street Journal is tied to the next Log4j vulnerability, or the headline in the Wall Street Journal is tied to the depreciation of sterling relative to US dollar, I think the sentiment shift changes. So that's sort of, I think, where we are, and we're going to have to work our way through it over the course of the next 2 years. But I think what the survey demonstrates is that there's a heightened level of anxiety around security, perhaps being something that has not been as scrutinized inside most organizations as being a KPI that needs to absolutely be upheld.
Yeah. Tim,
if I could,
does that mean we're having something that feels like a Ralph Nader moment where we're unsafe at any speed? And is there some way to have our cake and eat it too? Can we be safe and still build applications quickly?
actually have enough gray hair to know who you're talking about as well on that. I mean, what we're seeing, kind of leveraging off that in your question, I mean, yes, you can go faster, safer, and in fact, if you are safe and secure, if that's embedded in there, that's your way to go fast, because with DevOps and really fast pipelines, you can get to where you don't want to be faster than you ever thought imaginable. But where I think some of the issues are coming up is Anuj mentioned security folks are different from dev people, which is different from management people, and so forth. As people are talking different languages, and they need a way to kind of rationalize that. And one of the other things we looked at in the survey was how organizations define the work that they do. And some of our customers, and from the survey, there's innovation, there's risk, there's technical debt, and there's bug fixing. And you got to spend time mixed on some or all of those all the time. And one of the scary things is that companies spend about 75% of their time, 70% or more, not on innovation. They spend it on fixing things and technical debt and stuff that can arguably be said that it doesn't add any value. It may prevent, it inhibits value if you got these things. So if companies start looking at how they do work, then that gives them a language that they can decide, that helps them decide where to invest or where how to choose to spend time on this, that, and the other. And if that's too complex, another customer that we deal with, they have the concept of above the line and below the line. And above the line is stuff that adds value, and below the line is everything else that you got to do. And they're at about 30 to 40% above the line. And now you've got a language that business users can understand, and a language that the developers and the security people can understand to help drive those conversations on how do we make a change? How do we justify the cost of making these types of changes or making these types of decisions? Because if you tie it back to innovation as your value generator, then that sweeps away a lot of that friction as well.
Anuj, to Tim's point, what's your best advice to C-level executives who are confronted with this, right? They've got developers on the one hand speaking one language. They got a bunch of security people speaking another language. All they understand is there's some friction. The temptation would be just to throw them all in a room and lock the door and see what happens. But is there some, more intelligent way of going after this?
Yeah, I mean, there probably is. But, some of the examples that we've seen in terms of best practices is really driving a discussion almost beyond the CIO to say, what is the primary purpose of the application, right? 4 years ago, I used to sort of have this statement, which is your application is your business. And application experience is the only KPI that truly matters. So I think for a lot of corporations, they need to really deconstruct the role of applications and basically driving the primary differentiation that they see, whether it's employee facing, whether it's partner facing, or whether it's customer facing. So how important is the application? And within the application, how do you sort of value the attributes that are represented by each of those constituencies, right? How much of it is velocity of feature development and or UI UX improvement? How much of it is resiliency and scale? And frankly, how much of it is security? And, for a lot of our customers, what they will tell you is that somewhere between 90 to 100% of their revenues are actually driven through applications. So for all intents and purposes, they will tell you they're a technology company, just in the case of financial services with a banking license. So applications and application uptime is effectively synonymous with business resiliency and business uptime. So if you're a major financial institution and your systems to actually process international wire transfers, to the extent that goes down, well, that is absolutely revenue generating. To the extent you have a wealth management app and that goes down, that's absolutely revenue generating and NPS generating. So, is resiliency important? Are features important? Or are both important, but really ultimately ensuring the integrity and privacy of data in a secure and compliant manner the most important thing? And I think stratifying your application universe across those, I think, gives you an intelligent starting point to say that we need to move beyond sort of the high level platitudes around everything matters all the time to where we think we have a risk tolerance that we can manage today based on existing processes, and a risk tolerance that just may be aggressive based on where we find ourselves in. The other sort of reality is that there is a randomized aspect to security vulnerabilities, but there's also a very purposeful aspect. Different organizations get targeted differently, either proactively or accidentally, right? If you decided to basically use Log4j or some of the underlying applications where Log4j was a vulnerability, then you have sort of a systemic issue across your entire application tier. But if you had decided as a development team to perhaps use a different class of capabilities as the underlying supply chain component of your production software, then you were less impacted. So luck is a sort of element in this, because development decisions of the past result in vulnerabilities in the future. So I think that stratification, that understanding of sort of the risk that is tolerable and sort of what the key attributes are that customers value, I think is a way of sort of driving the discussion to say, let's reduce the aperture on what truly matters and what's above the line, below the line, and make sure that we all agree that there's a threshold that we can't violate. The reality, though, sort of the other dimension that I think we talk about is the sophistication of the tooling is just not there, right? In the security world, there is a sense that the more tools you put into an environment, the safer you will be. That's just not how developers think. They don't want to deal with sort of 5 different repos, but it's very normal inside a typical IT environment to find 40 to 50 different security tools to basically cater to the surface area of protection that you need. So I think driving sort of philosophical alignment between those two teams begins with understanding that they have very different jobs, and their approach on sort of third-party technology they use to actually accomplish what they need to do on a day-to-day basis is also very different. And you can't just apply a principle from security into development and a principle from development into security, because I think they're coming from 2 different worlds and probably won't see the alignment. So I think a lot of this does come down to, as you said, there is absolutely a human dimension to this, because both sides believe they're sort of on the right side of history in terms of what they want to accomplish, but we know they absolutely need to work together to drive the only outcome that a CIO or a CEO cares about, which is my application uptime what it needs to be to drive the outcomes that I need to with my customers and employees.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. The vulnerability is only the tip of the proverbial security iceberg, and the conversation gets bigger all the time. Tim, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Anuj, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Stay safe out there.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Cody J. Brown here with some programs happening next week at Techstrong Learning. So first up, Tuesday, October 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern, overcoming the challenges of deploying a microservices data layer on Kubernetes. Our friends from Redis will navigate the trade-offs and complexities of deploying at scale while embracing application and data layer modernization. The following day, Mitch Ashley from Techstrong Research joins speakers from Nirmata to discuss the findings of a recent Pulsemeter report and review best practices and technologies to overcome security challenges. You will not want to miss top Kubernetes security concerns and how to address them. That'll be Wednesday, October 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And jumping ahead to next Thursday, October 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern, the folks at Fairwinds are taking a look to the future as we discuss Kubernetes cost control strategies for 2023. This panel is taking us through some key approaches for controlling your Kubernetes spend in the coming months. So that is all I have for you right now, but as always, we have plenty of upcoming programs next week, and if you just can't wait until then, go ahead and look through our on-demand programs at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. We do have plenty of programs there waiting for you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, the great pleasure of being joined by Patrick Bergstrom. Patrick is CTO with StormForge. Good to be talking with you today.
Hey, Mitch. Great talking with you today.
You bet. Well, for folks that may not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and also about StormForge.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So my name is Patrick Bergstrom. Like you said, I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer over at stormforge.io. Fun fact, this is actually my first startup, which is a little unusual, I think, for most people. Prior to this, I was the vice president of enterprise operations for United Health Group, where I ran site reliability engineering and then also a software development arm that works primarily on like DevOps tools and monitoring tools and all kinds of capabilities that we enabled for the rest of the United Healthcare enterprise. And then prior to that, I ran site reliability engineering for BestBuy.com as well. So when I had my first couple of conversations with Stormforge, when I was getting ready to start looking for my next thing, they told me what they did. And I just kind of stopped and took a breath and said, okay, I've needed you for the last decade of my life. Where have you been? So needless to say, it's a perfect fit with Stormforge. So with our product, what we do is continuous optimization in an automated fashion for Kubernetes environments. So this is something that I've seen firsthand for years now, but whether it's with Kubernetes or previously when we were doing on-prem or EC2 instances, there's a need to essentially make sure that you're scaling your application correctly in a way that's fluid, in a way that meets demand spikes so that you can be there when your customers need you to be, but then more importantly, make sure that you're right sizing when they don't need you to be there. So one of the challenges that we have when running a large enterprise-sized Kubernetes cluster is that by default, we typically use like a cookie cutter recommendation for CPU and memory settings. And then we deploy that across 5, 6, 7,000 namespaces. And inevitably, you end up being drastically over provisioned, costing millions of dollars extra that you don't necessarily need to be spending. And so with Kubernetes in particular and the complexity there, it is possible to solve it by throwing human beings at the problem. But when you're operating at that scale, the humans don't scale, right? Mm-hmm. So with Stormforge, what we do is we leverage machine learning to essentially right size each one of those individual workloads so that you're not wasting money and you're not sacrificing performance for the sake of savings. Instead, you're getting both cost savings and increased capability when it comes to the performance of your application and then by extension respectability as well. So it's obviously a perfect fit for me, and I love the organization and I love the mission, what we're doing.
Well, it's perfect timing. I swear this is totally true. I just got off a panel with 5 SREs talking about the horrific challenge of performance tuning Kubernetes. So yeah. It's like right up your alley. You should have been
absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Well, so exciting news. Tell folks about the product and then what the exciting news is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing that we do, and kind of our tagline is we, speaking of SREs, we enable you to take that observability data that you're collecting and turn it into actionability. So there's a lot of capabilities out there, I think, that will highlight where you're spending a lot in Kubernetes or maybe where most of your compute resources are tied up. But they don't necessarily give you the specific actions to take. They just say, going back to the human thing, they say, hey, have some human beings look at this, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we actually collect the observability data straight from your monitoring tools, and we turn that into actionability by taking action on your behalf. Or if you are at a big sensitive enterprise organization, we will show you the recommendations and you can manually approve those or tie them into your CI/CD pipeline. There's a million different options. And originally what our product did was you could think of it as a really, really smart VPA, right? So we essentially replaced the vertical pod autoscaler within Kubernetes, and we directly made changes to the recommendations for how you deploy your pods into your environment. And as anybody who's really good with Kubernetes, especially at the enterprise scale, knows, there's basically 2 autoscalers with Kubernetes, right? You have your vertical pod autoscaler and your horizontal pod autoscaler, and never the 2 should meet. Especially if you're autoscaling based on default metrics like CPU, and you're trying to scale both vertically and horizontally on those CPU metrics, it will cause just a world of hurt. And so the exciting news is that with our new products, we are actually now able to recommend bidimensional autoscaling for your Kubernetes environments. And so what that means is that actually allows us to reduce the verticality of your pod down even further and enable the HPA. And then we can make smart recommendations and adjustments to the configuration of the HPA itself, which allows us to actually make sure that you're still meeting your needs for mean time to scale when it comes to bursting out horizontally. But at the same time, you're doing it on a reduced compute and memory workload, which allows you to save money, allows you to save carbon credits, and we're still guaranteeing the excellent performance and reliability of your application without having to worry about no longer having all of the extra CPU and memory waste that most organizations are wasting today.
So if I'm understanding correctly, I know that this is also with the product's called Optimize Live, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And if I'm understanding, the bidirectional part of it is you kind of squash down the CPU and memory and all the resource requirements to what you really need, and then you can scale it where you need to, auto scale it to whatever size is appropriate for given situation. Am I on track there?
You're absolutely on track, and that's the wonderful thing about our machine learning too, is that we're not just allowing you to use the HPA while using our system as well. We're actually making recommendations in an automated fashion for the verticality and the horizontal pod autoscaler itself. So we're actually making smart recommendations on what that scale point needs to be if you're using the HPA. And we take that into consideration when we're making our recommendations for the vertical size of your pod as well.
Now, machine learning, usually if it's if it's unsupervised machine learning, it's doing it on data, right? That's collected, running Kubernetes in the environment, et cetera. How much do you have to run Kubernetes with StormForge to start to get those intelligent recommendations?
Really great question. And that's one of the things that leads into the better your algorithm, right? And the more data that you have, the more you can do with it, the better the recommendation that you can make, especially when you're talking about true machine learning that's leveraging custom algorithms like ours is versus, everyone else that tried to sell me machine learning when I was at UHG. And it turned out to just be, I like to make the joke, but it turned out to be like 3 linear regressions in a trench coat, right? Like dressed up like it was machine learning.
Fancy case statement.
Yeah, exactly. Why are there just if then else statements in here? That's not, but anyway, no. So with our system, like I said, we're using observability data. One of the things that you might expect is that we install our system and then we just have to sit and watch it so that we can collect data before we make that first recommendation. However, one of the things that we can do is because we partner with a lot of the monitoring capabilities out there today, we integrate directly with Prometheus. We've actually just announced a partnership with Datadog as well. I think that was last week. We can also get access to historical data. So when you install our tool, we can actually go back and look at the last 2 weeks worth of data. And so then within a matter of hours, not days and weeks, we can have that first recommendation for you on what a right-sized pod looks like for your application.
That's
so same day.
And then,
really excited about it.
I'm really curious, how much variability do you see on the scaling side with the bidirectional? Is that something that you tune, like on a weekly basis, or are you tuning things more frequently than that?
Yeah, a lot of that depends on the customer and what their actual use case is. We can do for the bidimensional, we can actually do everything from down to a recommendation every single hour if you want us to, all the way up to usually the max we recommend is a recommendation once a week. And then we can do anywhere in between as well. Really, it depends on the seasonality of your workloads, like if it's changing day after day, week after week, or if it's stable for a month and you don't really anticipate changes. You can dial that back to where the recommendations are happening once a week, but ultimately it depends on the customer use case.
Well, and what's cool is it's not a point in time recommendation because you make that change. Now you're analyzing based on that configuration, that setup, and if that's performing the way you want it to, or you need to adjust it some more.
Exactly. And my personal recommendation is I usually look and I'll ask customers, like, how frequently are you releasing code, for instance? Because as an SRE, one of the things that I always said was, as soon as you make a change to an environment, whether that's you're increasing traffic, you're releasing new code, you've done a change to how you control your infrastructure, something, the previous analysis that you've done, whether that's a performance test or monitoring or what have you, it's no longer valid, right? You have to start over and watch it again. That's why we always say, do performance testing every single week, or in the case of something like StormForge, be monitoring for those recommendations as frequently as you can, because you never know how often your environment is changing to where you might need to make a tweak to really get the best performance out of your application.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm curious, what does an SRE's life look like when they're using StormForge as opposed to when they're not? I'm assuming it doesn't solve every performance, testing problem in the world. Obviously not.
Yeah.
It sounds like a big chunk of it is going to be happening on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I think it is. And one of the things that I've seen in my past, in particular with SREs, if you give them, call it unfederated access to configure a pod in application in Kubernetes, the first thing I would always do is say, okay, how high does the CPU dial go, right? Because the more CPU I add, the more memory I add, that's more reliability for me. And I think the thing that a lot of people don't understand, especially from the operations side of the house, when you don't control that P&L and you don't care what you're spending on it, right? You're going to crank it as high as you can go. But there is a point at which you reach those diminishing returns beyond that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what StormForge does is we find that exact point for you where you get the most bang for your buck. And then whether you're using our Optimize Live platform and the observability side of the house, or whether you're doing the experimentation side of the house with Optimize Pro, which is typically the spot where we see the SREs use it the most because it does supplement like your performance testing schedule, for instance. We actually can help you understand what that level of diminishing return looks like. Because if you don't necessarily care about how much you're spending, you care about getting the fastest possible 95th percentile response time out of your application, we'll show you that configuration, and 9 times out of 10, we can still save you 15, 20% off of your compute. But if latency isn't really important to you and you're okay with a 500 millisecond 95th percentile, we can oftentimes drop your savings down to 60, 70, 80% below what they were before. And so we found that this is really powerful, not just for the SREs, because even if you keep costs the same, we can help you make your application faster. But we've also found that the CFOs love it too, because we can help make the application faster and save money on your cloud compute bill. And so we run into that situation where you no longer have the CFOs banging on the door of the operations house saying, hey, like, why are you spending so much on cloud? This is ridiculous. It's one of those really neat tool sets where we just about make everybody happy that comes into contact with it. And you don't see that very often, which is nice.
And how many times do the technical folks go to the CFO and say, I saved you money, right? It's usually like, you need to save us money.
Yeah. Usually the advice I usually give them is don't tell them what you saved, right? Like spend it on something else, you'll be fine. But no.
you got to save some of that budget. Well, I think we carried, there's a lot of legacy to throw as much CPU and memory at it as possible. That's always the best answer right after rebooting the server, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Anything else to highlight in the release? I mean, obviously that's a big announcement and super exciting.
Yeah, it's a huge announcement, and we're absolutely thrilled for it, because it is one of those things where, like I said before this, this doesn't exist anywhere, right? So like we really are just saving so many headaches that I personally have had to deal with over the last decade, which is fantastic. But you can absolutely go to stormforge.io and grab a free trial and try it out for yourself. Depending on when this launches, it will have been out already, I believe. I don't know when we're publishing this one.
We're recording this right before you're launching. So
perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So definitely check out the free trial. We're like I said, we're over the moon with it. We're really excited.
Well, I have to say I know it's not just a bunch of really smart AI folks, right? You have a lot of Kubernetes experts, experts on your staff to be able to do this. I mean,
absolutely. And that's one of the things that we're really proud of as well, is just even if you just look at the raw numbers from the sheer number of certified Kubernetes experts that we have in the organization, it's very exciting. And a couple of them are even part of the core contribution group to Kubernetes, which is really neat. So yeah, you can definitely reach out to us at stormforge.io and chat with one of them as well. A lot of them are in our technical organization. And as you can imagine, they just love talking Kubernetes all day, every day.
Yeah, probably can't get them to stop, but that's good. That's what they do, right?
Exactly.
All right, Patrick, congrats on the release. And please check it out, stormforge.io, and use that account and go play with it, go use it. See what you can do. I mean, see what kind of savings you can get. Sounds very exciting. All right. Thanks, Patrick. We hope to see you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Mitch.
You bet.
This is Techstrong TV.
I have the great pleasure today of being joined by Guy Fletcher. Guy is co-founder and CEO of Cider Security. Welcome, Guy.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me, Mitch. It's good to be there.
Absolutely. Always love to talk security, actually app security. So we're going to get into that. Well, first, tell us about yourself, a little bit of an introduction, your background, a little bit about Cider Security.
Awesome. So, Guy, CEO and co-founder of Cider Security. Before that, almost 20 years in the security trenches, you can say. Grew up in the Israeli Air Force for many years in the cyber domain, then moved to private consulting to private and public companies. And then after a few years, moved to LivePerson, to the security team. There I worked in several positions. And then after a few years at LivePerson, moved to AppsFlyer, one of the biggest mobile attribution analytics company There I served as their first CISO. Basically, I established the security team there from scratch. And after 3 years at AppsFlyer, decided to move to my next adventure together with a friend of mine that we got to know each other at LivePerson. We worked together at the security team. So we decided to establish Cider, basically to try to fix the pains that we felt in our previous positions when we tried to work together with the engineering ecosystem. I think every day, every feature, we always say that every feature in the product, it's like a scar that we have that we try to recover with this feature. So a little bit about Cider. We are year and 8 months into the journey. We are trying to build this place that will allow security and DevOps team to work on security and all the different layers inside the CI/CD, which is, as you know, it's a very you can look at it a very chaotic area with a lot of opportunities for the different companies, but on the other end, pose a lot of challenges for the security team, and also not only by trying to follow and support the engineering needs, but also in a way that, and we saw it just in the last year in the last year and a half, in many breaches that happened, that the adversaries targeted the CI/CD ecosystem because
they did.
The security team is struggling to protect it and to implement security controls as part of it because of the fact that it's moving fast and constant changes and so on.
Well, I want to get into it a little bit, and I also saw, by the way, that Michael Coates, former CISO at Twitter, not a bad investor to have on board. So congrats, he's a great guy. Yeah. So, I think a lot of security teams are trying to figure out, how do we help? How do we become part of the software process, but not become software engineers, right? That's not their gig. But they're security specialists and know a ton about it, which, shift left can't mean the developers are just going to do it because they got plenty to do and they're not experts at it. So I think CI/CD is a great place to start, right? That's kind of a nexus where it comes together. Codes get checked in, built, tested, et cetera, moves on from there. Your experience as a CISO, I'm curious about with AppsFlyer, of what, if you could have done it the way you would have liked to have done it, what would you have changed in a situation like that?
So I think that the most important part is the fact that we need to understand this. We need to speak the same language, like engineering. That the fact that if you go, and this is also something that I felt in as a CISO, and also before that in security team at LivePerson, and for many, that when we try, me and the team try to speak with the DevOps and the dev team, we were in completely different understanding of what is happening. We always like to illustrate that, security teams are like walking with the map of Berlin in the middle of Manhattan or any other city that you like. They don't know what is happening. They don't know where to go. They don't know what is the connection. They don't know what is the relations that, if you go and ask many security teams, what do you know about your CI/CD ecosystem? Most of them will not have a good answer to give you. And from that moment, that's the problem start and grow to the places that we have today. And if I would be able to change it and much easier way to understand what is happening, I think that is the critical part.
Mm-hmm. No, I used to recommend if you're a security person, go learn about software architecture, go learn about cloud native and containers and microservices, and not everything's being done that way. But actually, that might be helpful. You don't have to become a software expert. But actually, now I tell people, go learn about DevOps, go learn about the process of how software is getting created. Because if you want to get engaged, that's where it's happening. That's where you can be part of it. So it sounds like a similar lesson from your experience.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about, so you're in the app security space. A lot of companies, a lot of technologies, rolling into market or already in market. What approach did you take with cybersecurity, and why is that different or better than what other folks are doing?
So I think that it's going back to the origin of what we speak about going from the bottom-up approach. The fact that first of all, we try to understand the terrain. We try to understand what is happening, what is the common ground of the stuff that need to be done, and providing the security team the ability to first understand what is happening, what is actually happening there, with the context, with the understanding of the flow, what is connected to what, for example, what repo is connected to what pipeline, to what image is being put as part of the build process, and all the way to the pod inside the production, and what third parties are involved, whether it's part of third-party libraries that are part of the code, or whether it's apps and webhooks that are part of the SCM, or Jenkins plugins, or stuff that is running as part of the pipeline. But it's not just giving you lists of stuff, just giving you a lot of information. That's a problem with many security tools, by the way, that I worked in the past. They're giving you, here are all the languages that you have. Here are all the containers that you have. Good. What is the context? What is the relations between specific language to specific pipeline to a specific container? Start with that, and then based on that, build all the layers of the different security controls that you need to have inside your security as part of your security practices for CI/CD. One layer is, of course, the ability to protect your CI/CD and understand the risks inside your different systems, in the GitHub, in the Jenkins, Artifactory, and so on and so forth, but also in the relations between the system, because the systems are highly connected between themselves. This is one layer. The second layer is the ability to implement and tailor the relevant engines relevant to your environment. How many times security teams brought in some very fancy scanner and pay a lot of money and took out a lot of its budget on specific scanner, but eventually the scanner is like good for very certain portion of your technology stack, because any engineering teams are using multiple languages, multiple frameworks. We see on average like around 15 different languages and frameworks that are being used as part of the development processes, and there is no single solution out there from scanning perspective that can support all those flavors in a good way. So we provide the ability to tailor from a marketplace what you need, whether it's a commercial solution or open source solution. We are not tie ourselves to any type of solution. And this is why we took a decision also not to try to develop a scanner by ourselves. There are good scanners. The problem is not the scanners. The problem is not to find something that is good for Python, something that is good for Ruby, something that is good for Node.js. The problem is that you need to be able to easy to implement it, and also match it to the right technology and stuff that you have inside your environment.
Guy, I think I agree with what you said. I think another aspect of it is oftentimes security people think of like pen testing or scanning as a point in time activity. This is a continuous process, right? Software is being checked in, built, going into test, dev, whatever. And the tool chain and the technology is evolving at the same time. So you have to think, you wouldn't put an intrusion detection system in and only turn it on once a week, right? Or whatever technology. It's got to be inline, part of the process, built into it, upgrading to be compatible with the other technologies. So it's a contact sport. And I think that's a mindset change for security people too. Just think continuous. Everything's got to be continuous. You got to be in the workflow, the pipeline.
Absolutely. And going back to the first step, you need to be able always to understand what is happening with the right context. It's not only to know that you have, for example, Python. You need to know exactly on which repo is located and which repo is going all the way to the production environment and which is not. So you need to know, and so on, and on other aspects of the CI/CD. Only by understanding, doing a good asset inventory for your CI/CD. This is why we call it the technical DNA. But giving you, like in any other aspect that you need to do in your as a security practitioner, whether it's your corporate environment, your production environment, development environment, any environment, before deciding what to do, before deciding on the security measure, you need to understand what you have. You need to have a clear understanding with the right context of the different elements. And then let's make sure that we are giving the right security controls to what we have.
I'm curious. I don't know if this question will ever be resolved of what the right answer is, but do you sell to security people, security engineers, or do you sell to developers? Because I know in the developer world, they'll sniff you out immediately if you're not a development tool, right? That's a security tool. Go talk to the security people.
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't fit easily into my development environment, my workflow, my path, my pipeline, whatever. It's got to be sort of low friction, right, for them and add value, not more work. Not that the security people want more work. They don't either. So how do you approach that problem? Who to sell to?
So we eventually said to the security team, eventually at the end of the day, security team buy security products and will invest in security tools. It's not like developers they have the budget. It's not like developers will not invest or will try to find a solution if they are, by the way, if they are small, mainly in small companies that they don't have security teams at those stages. But once you have a security team, at the end of the day, they are the ones that are being measured on security risks and gaps and stuff like that. Of course, more and more engineering teams are adopting more proactive approach and try to be more good with security and implement security as part of their day-to-day. But at the end of the day, it's the security team that will invest on those tools. However, I must say, it's not like we are completely focused only on security teams. We are also working very close with DevOps teams because they are strong champions of what we're doing. We are giving them the understanding that, first of all, a lot of elements of what we are providing is very necessary for DevOps day-to-day. The visibility that we are giving in the day-to-day of the CI/CD, not even for DevOps team in many cases don't have this capability. So we are working very closely with the DevOps team to be champion of the platform of Cider. By the way, this is why we are, for example, one of the main sponsors for DevOps Days in Israel, one of the biggest conferences for DevOps. But yeah, but the bottom line, yeah, the budget comes from security at the end of the day.
Go where the money is. Not a bad answer. Well, Guy, great to talk with you. I appreciate you stopping by. You've actually learned a lot, both in your previous experience and now applying this to Cider. Where can folks find out more?
So you can go in to our website, to cybersecurity.io. There you have a lot of materials. One of the pages, we have the top 10 CI/CD risks, something that we published just a few months ago, something very interesting that we shared with the community, but we worked with the community before that, such as Michael Coates, Adrian Ludwig from Atlassian, and many other amazing people from the industry. And this is something that related to the protection of the CI/CD and understanding the gaps and how you solve it. So also something very interesting to see. And yeah. And also we have on GitHub, we have the CI/CD GOAT, which is a deliverable CI/CD with issues related to the top 10 CI/CD. And you can do learning together with the DevOps team to learn about how to understand gaps inside the CI/CD and also try to protect them.
Joint project to work together with dev and security. So, all right, Guy, appreciate it very much. Guy Fletcher, who's co-founder, CEO with Cider Security. Hope you come back again soon.
Thank you. Thank you for the hospitality. Thank you.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural show of the Techstrong Research Review. So, and Mitch and I, first, I'm Mike Rothman. I guess I should introduce myself. I just kind of assume that everybody knows who I am, which is always a bad assumption. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Mitch Ashley. Mitch, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Mitch Ashley, principal with Techstrong Research, CTO Techstrong Group. So
yes, and I am
long-term partner, friend, whatever, colleague of Mike's as well.
GM of Techstrong Research, Chief Strategy Officer, Techstrong. Yes, those are our qualifications. That's why you're here to hear of us. But what we wanted to do is really kind of highlight and have a forum for Mitch and I, and then kind of analyst CB and or CD and E as they join as we grow the team to really kind of have a forum to kind of discuss what's on our mind, right? What are the things that we're seeing? What are the hot topics? Not newsy, right? Not from the standpoint of saying, hey, did you see that? That happened on Wednesday, right? Because we want these to be a little bit more content or kind of concept based as opposed to news driven. So welcome, right? This is Techstrong Research Review, and what are we going to review today, Mitch? I think you wanted to talk a little bit about a new release or a new initiative from ServiceNow. I thought that was kind of
I do. They just launched within the last few days here of us talking about it. Their Tokyo release is kind of their big annual release that ServiceNow. And of course, ServiceNow is really much more than what they were 3 years ago, right? They've acquired a lot of companies. They've gotten into observability and a number of things.
And security as well. I mean, they made a number of investments in terms of, trying to help and facilitate incident response and a number of those things that, again, I think get back to work management, right? How do I manage the work of the IT group?
Exactly. And it's interesting because I did an interview with their chief innovation officer. I'm not going to name drop, but anyway, I said to him, I see your commercials on TV, and the person will say, yeah, I did X, Y, and Z, and I'm not a coder. So it's an end user, citizen, developer kind of tools for low code, no code sort of applications for tools to build process workflow. But it's interesting in this release and talking with them about why they're doing what they're doing. It's kind of this, okay, now we're over the curve, we're over the transom from COVID, right? And having to rush and put things in place and make it digital wherever we can. And really, let's step back and say there's certain things that we need to add to this. Like we need leaders, ability to kind of manage the work of what people are doing with ServiceNow platform, with those things, with the things they've automated are some asset management, some things even around governance, compliance, and social, Mike, which I thought was kind of interesting. So in a way, it was, I don't know if I'd say it's a total maturation of the platform going to the next level, but I think it's a maturation of our digital transformation, the next phase.
Yeah.
A sign of where all of us are going in this digital transformation.
Well, I think that's right. And then you start to kind of get into this whole digital experience concept. And it really is, kind of broadening towards much more of a business centric view of the application of technology. And again, I think that's a healthy evolution, right? For a long time, we built out the infrastructure and we really transitioned the infrastructure, especially as we re-platformed around cloud, right? That was about kind of technology or evolving technology for technology's sake, right? More flexibility, more agility, depending on how you do it, possibly, better cost efficiency, certainly better security if you can do it correctly. And that's a big if, right? If you can do it correctly on that front. But now we're really kind of starting to talk and couch and position a lot of these efforts within the context of improving the business, right? That's what digital CXO is all about. Obviously, pimping another one of our properties. I'm actually doing a call with our friend Mr. Bizarre today to talk about some digital CXO type topics on that front. But again, I think it's a logical evolution, and you're going to see a lot of the companies that want to be the platform for digital transformation really is starting to position around these much broader concepts, not just, hey, make your technology more efficient, hey, make kind of your environment more virtualized or easier or more agile to use. It's really how can you impact business, and it's a totally different discussion, right? And from a customer standpoint, right, again, you're engaging different people, you're engaging different levels within the organization. It's really a collaborative thing with business moving forward, which, as I would say, right, kind of is something that's healthy as well as important as we continue to evolve.
No better time like the present. I remember doing an analyst call, it was probably a year ago with Atlassian, and I've used the Atlassian tool since Confluence 0.1, back in the early 2000s. But, they've completely repositioned themselves in Jira and things like that as a workflow management platform, not a ticketing system. And you can kind of say that a little bit about ServiceNow, I think. But it's interesting as you and I are talking about research, we're dealing with stuff that it's more on the leading edge and newer, and we're probably talking about a little bit about API security, kind of a newer topic. It's not a mature market, but it seems our conversations, Mike, have led to we're going from let's do these things, let's get to the cloud, let's make things cloud native or not, or whatever we're doing, to now the conversation is get real. It's time to get this done. Economy's doing whatever. We got to focus, profitability, revenue, all that stuff. It's sort of the, tough times, tougher economies have a tendency to get you a little focused on a few things.
And sharpen, you kind of have to sharpen your perspective on everything, and not to announce anything, so to speak, but that may actually be one of the main topics that we're going to talk about at Predict in January. Right. And that's right. And because that's such an important, and critical aspect of where we are, right? We've had such technology innovation over the past 5 years, really. And obviously, kind of the pandemic forced us to put a lot of this remote work and cloud platforming and SaaS, right, to work because we didn't have an option to go back into the office for way too long. All right. But now where we are is we've got all this innovation, we've got all this technology around, we've got to integrate it. right? We've got to use it. We've got to apply it to our business problems. And really Predict is going to be focused entirely on that, which is how do we use all these new toys that we have? Again, it's one of these things where every so often you get to a point where it's like, I don't need new toys, right? I need to figure out how to use the toys I already have. And we have lots of toys, even though everybody's always, kind of moving on to the next thing, and the industry wants to push us forward, right? That's the machinery of the technology industry that can drive valuations and VC investment and innovation, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, when you talk to a bunch of customers, it's not, hey, I don't have the tools to do this. It's I have not really integrated those into my processes, and that's what I have to focus 2023 on. And again, that's kind of why Predict is going to focus specifically on those topics.
Yeah, it's about results from those investments, right? Maybe I still need to spend more, or on other things, but it's about results, right?
Yeah,
Today.
you bet. Mitch, let's switch topics a little bit and kind of hit on, because one of the things I have to do. So we're helping out and promoting our friends at what's that one called, the CloudBees conference.
Oh, the DevOps World.
Yes, DevOps World. Everybody go to DevOps World. It'll probably be ongoing when you see this. But go to DevOps World. But one of the things I'm going to be writing about is kind of the impact that kind of the software bill of materials has on a lot of what we do. And the reality is, for those companies that have been worried about software composition analysis and understanding that they're assembling their applications now, as opposed to writing them out of whole cloth and really leveraging open source libraries as well as commercial PaaS services and the like. So there's just a lot of moving pieces in these applications that we're delivering to customers now. And companies have always had the option to do things like software composition analysis to understand where the vulnerabilities are in their environment. But that was for internal use, right? That was to, keep your own shorts clean on that front. What I really think is important about SBOM and, some of the standard protocols and formats that are being rolled out by folks like the Linux Foundation and CNCF, is that now we have a language so that we can start to communicate inter-enterprise to give us, again, an understanding about what you're using in your environment as I'm pulling that into my stuff, or as a customer, what libraries and what components are being used in these technologies that I'm using and possibly housing my critical data in. So again, I think that this is a great evolution for where we are. I think, we have to start factoring some of these analyses into third-party risk. And again, it's fine. Mitch and I, we have a big customer deal that we're working on right now. We have to, fill out their questionnaire about our security practices and stuff. But again, that's a microcosm of the macro situation, which is third-party risk is something that we all have to, really focus on. And SBOM is just another tool that we'll start to be able to leverage to be able to better assess the platforms that are holding our strategic data.
And I feel like we're at the very beginning of this process, right? Of course, identify what you have is, of course, what an SBOM is all about. And it'll evolve from that. Linux Foundation has both a project for that and training and tools and some great stuff. There's also another project they spun up about using blockchain to use that to authenticate, or is this real stuff you're adding to your software bill of material?
Blockchain, woo! All right, drink. If it wasn't early in the morning, we'd say, it's
throw lots of money at it, right? Because it's going to be big, trust me. But as I'm on this kick of nothing matters unless it's automated. Nothing can be manual because nothing is static. So an SBOM, the creation of that, the management of it has to be continuous. It has to be continuous, just like security does through the software process, just like it has in our networks, right? It's had to be continuous. And software supply chain is just as dynamic, if not more than anything else. So I think SBOMs are a great place to start, not poo-pooing that at all, that you got to start there. And I think there's some great tools to do that. But we're in the midst of rethinking about how can you imagine? I'm going to send you my entire list of every piece of software in my software just for you to use my service. People don't want to disclose that. There's a lot of issues we have yet to face about this whole, do I need a third party to certify it like we do vulnerability? Lots of things, right. A lot of places to go yet, which means a lot of innovation, a lot of services and products, as well as process things.
You bet. But I want to, and when we, kind of start to, grow and evolve Techstrong research, it really is focused on the user or the enterprise application of these technologies. And again, I've got a problem, right? My problem is that I'm asking a number of these vendor or suppliers that I use to self-assess or self-disclose what it is that they do through these questionnaire environments. And again, it's almost impossible to really validate that without going on site and doing it. And again, you can't do that in a leveraged way. So, SBOM and kind of the ability to really understand what's under the covers of these, software capabilities. I think that's an important step to continue to evolve our third-party risk practices. And as you just pointed out, right, certainly not going to be perfect. We certainly have disclosure issues. We've got, kind of proprietary impact that we have to worry about, right? Customers may not want, or suppliers may not want to, tell everybody, hey, this is some of our secret sauce, right? And we're not going to tell you exactly what that looks like or how we've integrated these things together. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to continue to work out. But again, from the user point of view, it is certainly a major positive to be able to understand what's going on in these environments, just to get a sense of, again, Log4j, right? You're trusting the fact that your provider says, I don't have this as an issue, right? And I know of companies that have said, their first statement was, I know this is not an issue until it was an issue. Because they didn't even know where it was, and they had a bunch of suppliers that were using it, kind of in this extended chain. So it is one of those things. Again, building block, right? But I think an important building block towards really getting a better sense of the technologies that is really touching our critical data, and that's what it's all about.
Well, I just want to highlight something you said also just about us. I know you and I are on the same page about this and in our work. Yes, we're going to pontificate about some things, but it's really trying to be as practical as we can about how you apply this, how do you solve real problems? Because there are folks that are really good at pontificating, but I don't think you're going to see any murky quadrants or wacky waves from us, right? That there's folks that already do that extremely well.
100%.
They have their role in that, and not
interested
by funny words for it, but.
Our general counsel is busy enough, right? And by the way, by that I mean we don't have one, so not interested in having to field the.
Don't write us. We don't need one.
Ombudsman or any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's not really the focus. Again, very similar to a lot of the work that I was doing at Securosis, right? It's enterprise centric, and we are going to write, and a lot of the research that we do is in that voice, right? Not about pumping or pimping out a specific technology or anything like that. It's really about helping enterprises to solve their specific technology challenges as these things come together, right? And again, that's one of the things that's so exciting to me. So not just this, kind of, hey, we can think about how SBOM contributes to, kind of the security or integrity of a company's software infrastructure. Yeah, right? But we're sitting in the middle of DevOps, right? And cloud native evolution and infrastructure evolution and the security impacts of that all kind of underneath, this whole digital transformation umbrella. It's an incredibly exciting, place to be. And again, that's kind of why I continue to be just so jazzed about what it is that we're doing in Techstrong research, to be able to, really kind of take a very critical look at, what are some of the success factors and what are some of the challenges and pitfalls that organizations are going to run into, as they embark on a number of these, major transformation processes and projects that really involve all of the areas that we cover.
Exactly. Well, speaking of areas of recovery, both you and I have been doing work in AppSec and API security. We had the Techstrong AppSec API security conference that was, in September, which is still available. Folks want to go check it out. Both of you had talks. I'd love for you to recap. I'll do a little bit too on your talk from that conference.
Yeah. So I did a talk. It was called "Do This, Not That." for APIs. And then for any of the folks that are nutrition, kind of wonks, there's it's a mass market, kind of book initiative, like eat this, not that, right? Just obvious stuff like, don't eat, kind of crap, just even things like ketchup, right? Ketchup has a ton of sugar in it. So if you're really worried about that kind of stuff, don't have regular tomatoes, not ketchup, right? Although ketchup tastes yummy. So I'm not about to go and judge and say, don't eat ketchup. I love ketchup more than anything else. Salsa is probably the first, but ketchup is pretty close right after that. So on this whole, do this, not that for API security stuff, it really, I kind of hit on a number of different things, right? First is visibility, right? You have to understand where your API attack surface is. And that means, again, not just, kind of evaluating each of the applications, but also doing some passive monitoring on the network to ensure that you can see what API traffic is there and ensure that you're not missing stuff from systems that you just don't know about, right? There's a detection aspect of that, which is to really, get understand what's in those APIs. What do the contracts say? Are the traffic, or is the traffic that's, going at these APIs, is that adhering to what you would expect from the contract, or are folks trying to do some malicious activity on that front, right? Kind of look and analyze things out of band. Yes, we all want to do everything that we can at the front end in your API gateway in terms of how you're managing it. But again, the fact is you're going to have areas, especially for application traffic that is internal to the organization. It may not go through your API gateway. You may not see all that stuff. So again, you want to be doing some passive monitoring. You want to be doing some, analytics, whether it's traditional NDR stuff, whether it's, kind of a purpose-built API security, kind of monitoring environment. You want to do that. And finally, the last point that I made, which is, kind of, I think in a lot of cases, the most important, it's about collaboration with the developers, right? It's not about doing a scan and saying this is broken or this API is too, kind of permissive, or it doesn't have the right, kind of permissions on it. It's about how do we solve this problem? If you just dump a report on the developers that say, this is broken and you gotta, kind of fix all this stuff without the context, they're going to puke on it, right? They're going to ignore it. They're going to, deprioritize it in the next sprint, and you're not going to achieve your goals. So that collaboration thing, I think, kind of outweighs everything. But there are some technical stuff we have to really improve in order to continue to bolster our capabilities along the API security line.
Yeah, you can see right in all the things you talked about, sort of the practical conversations you've had with folks about exactly those issues. By the way, I'm glad you named your show "Do This, Don't Do That," "Don't That," right, or whatever, versus the shows they have on TV. They're about eating the biggest hamburger in the world.
That's right.
With as much ketchup on it as possible. That's
or like some weird, kind of, diet or
yes.
Kind of food from these places. You're like, oh my God, they could even eat that. Yikes. So yeah.
Well, kind of on that vein, I've been doing a lot of focus around API security, AppSec security over the past really 12 months, and focusing more on API security. And there's a lot of good studies some vendors have done, of course, analysts have done good technology, and folks are coming out with, here's the catalog about, where you identify what your APIs are, for authentication, authorization, kind of the basic principles we talk about in security all the time, web application firewalls and gateways, now API gateways. So there's a lot of elements to this, and I think important to look at. My talk that I did was more about, well, let's step back, and you can go buy all that stuff and really implement them in a terrible way that you're not going to get much out of, I think. Or you could do it in a way I think it's really going to set you up for success. And I talked about three keys to API security: continuous API security, continuous being the point. And the first is, as network professionals, maybe we've done this, I don't think we have yet, but we have to stop thinking about what we're securing is identities of people and things and objects, like devices or a software device or something like that. That's kind of the heritage you and I come from, right? We're trying to protect this network, this server, this whatever. And what we're about is everything is software, and everything is in some form of software, and it may be spread out across multiple places, interconnected services, et cetera, which is where APIs come in. So start thinking about protecting things and start thinking about how you think of the world as wholly as software. The second key was around, if it's not automated, as I said before, as soon as you hit the save button, like any project plan, as soon as you hit the save button, it's out of date, right? It's wrong already. Same thing in our world, because software development, software deployment, the environment, the infrastructure's code, all that stuff is continuously under change. And of course, we know SaaS services or things like that are way out of our control. We don't know what changes are happening to that. And the third point, well, I'll let you go watch it, but kind of a hint to it was it has to be about continual change, that expect nothing to be in the state that you thought it was in, right? And last time you looked at the log an hour ago, this is what it was. Well, 5 serverless apps spun up and were gone and caused that thing you think was the security problem somewhere else. And so if you think about that and how that flows into the software development process, in a DevOps world, right, where it's highly automated, that's how you can think about, not just your deployment environment, but also how you build in security to it. So I think it's an extremely intriguing topic to me, because API first approaches where everything is, the whole app is the API, right? Maybe it doesn't have any GUI at all, right? User experience is, through a REST call. So that world is already transformed. And I think security professionals have to work with their software colleagues to help them understand how to rethink that.
Yep. And so that's exactly right, Mitch. I mean, I think, and one of the things I want to highlight, and as we kind of wrap up, right, our first Techstrong Research Review show is really, I think the word of the day, right, is continuous, right? So whether we were thinking about, kind of the whole workflow aspect of, kind of the new ServiceNow platform and really how work is really in these platforms that help manage at least the IT work and growing into other areas, right? Obviously with SBOM, you have a continuous change and dynamic environment and, again, just taking a look at it once when you're doing your third-party risk, not going to be helpful. I mean, everything is changing on that front, and APIs, right? Kind of applications are changing always. So we're entering into, really a continuous type of mentality and environment. And we really have to, kind of succinctly think about how that is going to really impact everything that we do. Right, everything that we do, and I think that's an interesting concept that we need to continue to kind of pull on threads. We need to pull on as we both do the review as well as a lot of our other research. Is that continuous and the continuous nature of a lot of these technologies is it's really going to impact everything that we do.
Spot on. Well, it's been a pleasure doing our first one. If we're going to have a word of the day for all of our episodes, maybe we have the Groucho Marx stuck coming from the ceiling, for those of you that remember.
That's right. But the problem is that would mean we would have to think about that before we actually
We'd have to plan it. So I see what you're saying.
I think the wrap up, one of us will wrap up and decide what the, theme or the word of the day is as we've done it, because, and that's the goal, right? Is that this is, an informal type of review of the stuff that we're thinking about and bouncing some ideas around. So giving you folks out there, all of our kind of listeners and watchers on that front, a view into our research process, right? And that's how it happens, right? We think about stuff, we pull on threads, we discuss them, we debate them, and you're going to be able to get a view into that. So welcome to the review. Glad you're here, and we will see you next one.
Great. If you want to reach out to us, you can send email to info@techstrongresearch.com or visit that website. Well, lots of great free reports and stuff there. So check us out.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Carl Sigler, who is a senior security research manager at Trustwave Spider Labs. That's a handful of a title, but it's all good. And we're going to be talking about how the bad guys are using penetration testing tools and what that might mean for folks, because it seems like the tools themselves are getting better. And so the question is how to respond. Carl, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me today.
Bad guys, of course, have been using penetration testing tools for a while. They cut both ways, just like any other tool. But the question is are these tools becoming more sophisticated? Are we seeing advances in that space? And are they being used more aggressively for evil purposes?
That's a good question. I think they're definitely more advanced. A lot of the tools that we see coming out today for both good and malicious purposes tend to have a lot more features than we've seen even in the past 5 years, 10 years. So yeah, definitely more features involved. Whether or not they're being used more now than previously, it's hard to say. I think that criminals have always hand-rolled their own tools sometimes, and sometimes rather than reinventing the wheel, they go with the common tools that we all use. Back in the day, this was things like Nmap to scan networks for reconnaissance purposes and find out what was live out there. Metasploit was a huge tool for both good guys and bad guys back in the day. These days, it seems to be more Cobalt Strike, which is a very flexible toolkit to allow persistence and footholds and lateral movement throughout a network after you get that initial foothold. So we're seeing those tools used by, again, both good and bad guys.
Is there some way to detect those tools? Because essentially, if you see them, that's a reconnaissance mission that somebody's on, and it's clear that they're going to look for something. So can I follow their trail?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you'll often see that the Cobalt Strike tool, or really any of these pieces of malware, now that the good guys know about them, we've developed detection logic and detection guidance for how to find these malicious exploits, both on the network. If you're using things like IDS or a smart switch or something like that to monitor your network segments, or even on the endpoint, if you have endpoint protection, anti-malware solutions, things like that, there are definitely signatures available that can flag this for you. I think the problem that some organizations get into is that, again, these are used for both good and bad purposes. So if you have a complex organization or you don't have good, clear communication across the board, you may find that these signatures, the protections that you put in place to prevent Cobalt Strike may be triggering on valid activity. It could be your IT staff that is doing a scan to make sure you're not vulnerable to specific things. It could be your network administrators that are doing an Nmap scan to make sure there aren't any rogue hosts that are out there. So you need to have clear communication in-house for what to detect and what to allow on, an allow list to not trigger on those types of false positives.
How will penetration testing evolve, or should it evolve? And I'm asking the question because historically somebody would run one of these tests and then they'd issue some sort of report and they'd pat themselves in the back if they passed. But the IT environment would change substantially within days. And so whatever I was testing for is no longer completely relevant because the landscape has changed. The number of endpoints have increased. The way the applications behave has changed. So do I need to evolve this into something that feels more like a continuous process?
100%. It's never just a set it and forget it. Like you say, our networks are dynamic. They're constantly changing. And I generally see penetration testing done in conjunction with other types of security consulting things, whether you're doing it in-house or whether you're using a third party. Typically, there's not too much that a penetration test can find that just a standard vulnerability assessment scan couldn't find, right? So you're looking for holes in your network, you're looking for hosts that maybe you forgot about or people set up as test systems and left on the network. You're looking for patches that aren't in place, things like that. And your standard vulnerability assessment tools out there, Nessus from Tenable's a good one, OpenVAS is open source and free. There's a lot of tools out there that you can use to scan your networks and make sure that you're as tight as you can be. Now, where penetration comes into place is where you're putting a lot of human knowledge, experience, and intelligence behind looking at your vulnerability profile, your risk profile, if you will. And a penetration tester might be able to see how to take maybe some really minor vulnerability that the company didn't even consider a vulnerability or decided was not worth patching because it was so minor, and take that one single little foothold and then expand it into a more robust breach. So the two things have different purposes. I don't like to see a penetration test sold to find out what you're vulnerable to. I like to see penetration tests sold more as like a red teaming environment where you're looking to see how your overall information security structure in-house is responding to a threat and responding to complex chain attacks.
Mm-hmm. Are the bad guys going after this with a continuous process as well? It seems to me they would pick a target and just start monitoring that and looking for opportunities, and it doesn't take them too long to strike, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot more of that where, again, even a decade ago, we were seeing a lot of opportunistic attacks, throwing a wide net and seeing what you can pull in, especially for financial purposes. A lot of times it's cheaper to launch those types of attacks versus the return on your investment for all of the money you've stolen from that wide net that you throw out there. These days, we're seeing a lot of different motivations. We see nation state motivations, corporate espionage, things like that, where the goal isn't necessarily strictly financial, or even if it is financial, the criminal organization has decided that they might be able to get more money if they are more careful with how they attack the organization, in which case they will set up an entire stage of reconnaissance. They will comb through your organization's public information, your public website, your LinkedIn pages, all the employees on the LinkedIn pages, map out an org chart based on all of that, who has public Twitter profiles, Facebook profiles. And they're going to build a literal booklet about exactly how your organization works, who's on top, who's on bottom, and who is the most likely target for attack, and then start those attacks from there, from that specific point. And depending on the motivation and what they're looking for on the other side of the equation, a lot of times those more careful planned attacks have a lot more results coming out.
Mm-hmm. Are the bad guys also starting to use AI, and are we involved in some sort of arms race involving AI in this space, and what does that look like?
That's an interesting question. I have not seen any of the cyber gangs that we have been following looking at using AI specifically. But we are seeing adoption of AI, machine learning, deep learning technologies across the board. I imagine that a lot of cyber groups out there might be using AI for figuring out exactly what the best evasion techniques are, for instance, against specific anti-malware products. So where today, if a malicious actor wants to make sure that the malware they're custom creating isn't discovered by, antivirus vendor number one, which is what their target is using, they're going to load it up in VirusTotal and see if there are any detections for it. I think that that type of procedure, which is right now manual for a lot of criminals, could be performed by setting up a big training pool of various malwares and then antivirus vendor one's signatures, and just letting that deep learning engine train itself on what is the best evasion techniques for that specific piece of malware. Again, I haven't seen that. I'm just speaking hypothetically, but I absolutely believe that could happen. And we're definitely using it on the good guy side. In fact, the research team in my company just came out with a machine learning engine that spots phishing URLs in emails. So we actually supplement our experience detection guidance that we set up with that trained machine learning engine that has been trained on billions of phishing URLs to properly detect one and eliminate ones that would cause false positives. So adoption is definitely out there. I haven't seen it on the bad guys' agenda so far, at least openly on their agenda so far. I'm sure that will happen now.
Mm-hmm. As we continue to see what's going on in the Ukraine, and there's clearly a whole cyber warfare component of that, are we starting to see more of a democratization of pen testing because there are more people at least learning the skills or trying to learn the skills for various activities, good and ill? And so will the pool of people who are capable of using this tool for both ill and maybe even hopefully good start to increase as a result?
Absolutely. 100% that is happening. We're seeing a lot of organizations, they're being forced to either train their people to protect their networks and are taking cybersecurity seriously. And that cat and mouse game of we're putting protections in place and good guys or bad guys are finding out how to evade those detections. So we put new blocks in place, and that sort of back and forth raises the experience, intelligence, and skill level of everybody involved. And so far, it's been a lot of back and forth. I think we've seen a lot of really good stories coming out of the Russian-Ukraine situation. We've seen a lot of specific attacks from Russia, who is very, very well versed in cyber activity, actually blocked by Ukrainian cyber protectors. And that sort of cat and mouse game, the skill level, and seeing how they're able to set up these attacks and set up protections against these attacks has definitely become a lot more complex than it used to be. A lot of the protection advice that we give is the same advice that we've been giving since the late 90s, but the complexity of those attacks has definitely increased quite a bit.
What's your best advice to folks then? What should they be thinking about? What should they be putting in place today? Are there best practices that should be employed to kind of defeat or at least thwart these reconnaissance attacks, and then B, for them to use the capability to protect themselves?
Sure. A lot of the advice that we've been giving, we're still giving. First, patching is so important. A lot of these initial attacks that we saw, specifically in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we're targeting vulnerabilities that had patches available up to 18 months prior to the attacks. People are still not patching quickly, and that's leaving gaps in your networks for bad actors to come on in. And we repeat this advice a lot, and a lot of administrators get beat up for not applying patches properly or quickly. And a lot of people don't realize just how difficult that process is, how complex patching can be, especially if your most valued systems, the ones that are going to really heighten your risk profile, are also the systems that have 5 nines of uptime, and you can't really bring them down. There's really the availability protection needs to be so high that you can't take a risk of that blue screening because of a faulty patch or a specific implementation that you have. So administrators have to be very careful in how and when they push patches out. So it can seem like a really overwhelming process, and obviously it is, because a lot of organizations still are not doing it properly. But I think anyone who's involved with a IT team or an administrative team that's listening to this, revisit your patching policies and revisit them now before any of those vulnerabilities get exploited. That's definitely probably the biggest thing I see, people not getting patches in place properly. And I do understand the problem, but we need to address that problem. And it's going to be unique for every single organization. So the better you know your organization, the better you're going to be able to solve that problem for your organization specifically. In addition to that, I would say also, not to cut you off, the phishing attacks are probably the number one entryway that a lot of these attackers get in. Greater than 90% of compromises and breaches we see come from an initial foothold of a phishing attack. A lot of times that'll be a spear phishing attack targeted using those reconnaissance techniques that we just talked about. But if your systems are patched properly and there's no other way to get in, they're going to stop attacking software and operating systems that are going to start attacking the people behind the keyboard. And they'll use very convincing social engineering scams to convince that person that's looking at that email to either click on a link or open an attachment. And again, that's probably the biggest method of entry, both in the Russian-Ukraine conflict and across the globe historically for well over a decade. Having ongoing security awareness training for your users so that they know what the new phishing techniques are that are out there, what sort of new techniques are being used against them, how urgency and that sort of making sure that it looks legit. They're getting a lot better at that. So we need to make sure that our security awareness training matches that challenge.
All right. As is often the case in life, the only thing worse than getting tested is not getting tested, right? Hey,
totally.
Carl, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here at Yala. You know, I think I mentioned it a few times. There's 700 attendees signed up for Yala today, and it's, I think most of them showed up because it's been pretty crowded. It's a big area, but it's a lot of people. It's good. You know, we spoke to a lot of JFrog people. We spoke to a lot of the companies that are exhibiting. But my favorite part is talking to real people who are doing development, doing DevOps, security, hear from the community here in Tel Aviv and Israel in general. I want to introduce you to Or Maman.
Yeah.
Or is just an attendee here at Yala. He doesn't work for JFrog or any of them. He is or I don't want it. You tell them.
Yeah,
what do you do?
So, first of all, I want to just, say sorry for my rusty English.
Fine.
Hebrew speaking here in Israel. What I'm located at NICE. NICE is pretty much a prominent company in Israel. It has many verticals, very diverse, from recording to call centers to anti-frauding, very diverse. And my team is doing a very interesting, I can say, thing with our vertical, which is DevOps for DevOps. We are 5,000 employees at NICE, and most of them are R&D related, as I recall. You can imagine that there are a lot of DevOps, teams which are very diverse with all kinds of LOBs. It's a very hectic environment. They brought me here to make some sense and bring uniformity, but a smart uniformity towards NICE. And they told me, to go on the yellow brick road that leads to, I need to find the pathway and where it's going. To find a common ground between so many LOBs and diverse, DevOps team and R&D departments, it's a huge challenge.
Sure is.
It is. And because there are not many, you can see a lot of vendors which are amazing. What they're doing essentially, if we can bring to one-liner, is make your life as DevOps easy. But for DevOps, there is no such platform. You need to comprise and compose, if you will, all of those, let's say, vendors or whatever to one coherent structure. And this is what we do at NICE.
So are you doing it just for NICE, or is NICE doing it as an offering for the community?
No, it's internally at NICE.
It's internal.
Yeah, it's only for actual to bring NICE on a certain pathway towards uniformity, but productive uniformity. That doesn't limit you, because uniformity usually kind of limits you, put you in a box. Here,
well, it's like socialism. Everyone is at the same level. But I don't want to get political.
Actually, if you will, I'm going for it. I'm anti-socialist. I'm very capitalist.
No, I get it. Just bringing it up. But, so here's the thing, though, my observation, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
One of the unique things about DevOps, and I've run DevOps.com for 2013 to almost 9 years now. Yeah,
right.
Is that in most organizations, especially larger enterprises, DevOps adoption was not homogeneous. In other words, it wasn't that the CEO made an announcement that said, we're all going to do DevOps. No. DevOps in most organizations was bubbles of DevOps, pockets. This small team was doing DevOps. This other small team was doing DevOps, but they weren't necessarily collaborating. They might have been using Chef. This one was using Puppet. This one used that tool, that one. You know what I mean? There was no communication. There was no uniformity. There was no coordination. That's a good word. And then what would happen, though, is that as these organizations grew, these little bubbles, you ever blow bubbles when you were a kid?
Obviously.
Right.
Until today,
It's a fun thing to do. But as these bubbles hit up against each other, they became bigger bubbles.
Yeah.
And bigger bubbles. Remember? And so that's how DevOps, it was very organic.
That's the thing, because I think that, I mean, DevOps, in Israel there is a huge shortage of DevOps. I mean,
well, not just Israel, all over.
Okay, so, and I think it's because this is not a discipline that was taught by academy. It was a homegrown, high-tech environment.
Organic.
Exactly.
Holistic, organic stuff.
So, therefore, there's so much disparity between them. There's no common ground. And I think that for DevOps, from our perspective, is bringing not only the conformity and the uniformity. I want to bring you a catalog of building blocks that you can go and change and play with them and bring your own environment. I mean, you just need only to think about your app logic. That's it. All the other things, cloud, AWS, Azure, all the DevOps tools that you're seeing here, I bring it to you in the best way in one API call away or 2 clicks.
Beautiful.
This is what we are doing. We have a cloud portal which we're aspiring to release it as a tool to the community in the future. But the thing is, give or let your environment to have a catalog of methodologies and technology in order to implement in your place. In one-stop shop for everything DevOps, compliance, cloud. Everything is one-stop shop.
Now, sounds great.
Yeah.
A fly in the ointment, as we say in the U.S.,
okay.
Right? DevOps, developers, DevOps, there's so much demand, they get to pick where they want to work.
Exactly.
Money isn't the object, because they could name their own price.
Right.
So one of the things they look for is the freedom to use whatever tools they want. And the old saying, I learned this in Hebrew school when I was a young boy. 2 Jews, 3 opinions.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very...
Developers are yet worse. 2 developers, 5 different tools.
Yeah.
Right? Every developer has their favorite tool, their almost favorite tool.
Right.
The tool they'll never want to use. So that's a challenge for you. How do you be uniform while giving the people the choice they want to use the tools they want?
So the thing is, the magic word here is IAC. Infrastructure as a code and GitOps as a concept made creative people very much capable of doing whatever they want. Once you have everything programmed and everything modularized, this is not such a bad idea. I mean, it's not so hard to implement as it was in the past. Right. Today, I can give a comprehensive package of whatever you want,
really?
with minimum, maintainability. Because in the past, it was horrendous. To maintain everything, and to keep your configuration intact, and to impose it, so to speak, on your clientele, horrendous. Before that, before my position here, I was a consultant in Sela, which is a prominent consultancy firm in Israel. It was hectic.
It's
crazy. And I came to see that organization that's really integrated the culture of IAC into those systems. Everything went from then on. Everything is much more organized.
Let me ask you a question though. So if this is so good, is there a thought about maybe productizing this or open sourcing it for others to use?
So that's the thing. It is all, I'm waiting for NICE to give me the green light, but at the end of the day, if everything goes as progress, we want to make it a productized, but not to be one of those vendors. I want it to be open source that everyone can take and
Play
play with it.
with it. That'd be great. If they do, you got to come back on and tell us
obviously.
All about it. You promise?
You have my promise.
What do you think of Yalla this year?
Yeah, you know what? Yalla, in many ways, it's like a boutique convention. Israel, we have so many conventions all the time. This is a very prolific environment. But Yalla, it's like this boutique environment, you come, you see this is a small industry. We all know each other. But Yalla, it's this boutique thing. It's small, it's rather convenient, the networking is easy, the offerings are great.
Yeah.
So all in all, I like Yalla DevOps.
Excellent. Thank you
very much.
On. We should give a plug. NICE, their website.
Sorry?
The NICE website. What's the company's website?
I think that's nice.com, I guess. I don't know.
Nice.com? He doesn't even know. All right. Hey, we're at Yalla. I guess it's a break, right? Everybody's
maybe
eating.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, thanks. We're back here after lunch in Austin. Well, after lunch for some of us still didn't eat lunch. But we're in Austin at the Linux Foundation Open Security Summit, and I want to introduce you to a gentleman named Jonathan Lightshoe. And I'm really proud to say that Jonathan is the first recipient of the Dan Kaminsky Fellowship from the folks at Human Security, which of course was Dan's company. And as someone who knew Dan for many, many years, I don't know. It's kind of bittersweet to tell you. I got to be honest. It's a little bittersweet. Unfortunately, Dan passed away way too young. And
he was 42.
Yeah. But I'm glad to see, his name carried on and someone doing good work. Anyway, Jonathan, welcome and thanks for joining us on Techstrong TV.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's kick this off first. The Dan Kaminsky Fellowship. What is it?
So it was created after Dan's passing by Human Security to commemorate Dan's memory, to allow an individual or group of individuals to do work in open source that helps improve does something good for the world and hopefully helps improve the security of the internet. Dan was well known for his kindness and his giving back to the community. He was also very well known for some of his really famous security research, like the DNS vulnerability that he silently fixed by spending, I think, a lot of his own time to go to every single vendor and say, this is a massive vulnerability, let's get this fixed. And so to commemorate his memory, Human created a fellowship to try to encourage and support someone going out into the world and making some positive change in the security of the internet. So
good. And congratulations to you for winning it. Jonathan, just some way of background, we spoke a bit off camera. You've been doing security research now for about 4 years, 4+ years.
3 or 4 years, yeah.
I found some whoppers. One of which was the Zoom vulnerability that came out. It was during COVID, I remember.
No. This is the one the year before COVID.
Oh, the year before COVID.
Yes.
There was another one.
There was
during
another
COVID
one. Yeah.
That was nasty.
There was a couple of ones for COVID.
Look, and no knock on Zoom. It can happen to anyone.
Yes.
Obviously.
During COVID, they experienced 10 years worth of growth and 10 years worth of vulnerabilities in a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
But anyway. But you're also working with the Linux Foundation a little bit now, and why don't you tell our audience a little bit about that?
I've been very passionate about vulnerability disclosure. I do open source security research. I find vulnerabilities. I'm not doing that very actively now. The Dan Kaminsky Fellowship, I've pivoted slightly, and I'm doing more finding widespread common security vulnerabilities and then generating thousands of pull requests to fix those vulnerabilities. But in the past, I have something like, I think 40 is low. I think I have more like CVE numbers that I've had assigned for vulnerabilities that I've worked on. And so I have some experience with getting vulnerabilities found and fixed. And I'm also working with someone named Madison. She works at GitHub. She formerly worked at CERT at Carnegie Mellon. And there's some other people together. We're working as a part of the Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group as part of the Open Source Security Foundation Linux group to come up with a guide for people who have found vulnerabilities either with intention or accidentally to help guide them through, okay, what is vulnerability disclosure? How do you do it? What are the norms? Not like, you must do this, but like these are the norms, and this is maybe some of the history as to why these norms exist. This is what coordinated vulnerability disclosure is. This is what full disclosure is. This is why you might want to use these disclosure methodologies. The suggestion that we're putting forward, at least I'm putting forward, is use coordinated vulnerability disclosure first. If that doesn't work, here are some escalation patterns or escalation paths you can go down. If all else fails, full disclosure, at least it'll get the information out there into the world so that people know that they need to mitigate this vulnerability or remove some vulnerable package or fix it in some way. So
look, our audience is pretty sophisticated.
Yep.
But for those of you who are not familiar with vulnerability disclosure protocol, right? The idea here, and you're an expert, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been doing this a long time. The idea here is if you find a vulnerability and you want to just, can't wait to tell the world that you as a researcher found a vulnerability, you probably compounded that vulnerability by 1,000-fold by just announcing it and putting it out there in the public, because now every bad guy in the world who maybe didn't know about that vulnerability is going to say, oh, there's a vulnerability here. Let's find an exploit before these guys patch it.
Yep.
So the concept of responsible vulnerability disclosure probably started in the early 2000s, maybe even before.
Yep.
And basically, back then it was much simpler than it is now. But basically, back then it was the idea of, hey, let the owner of the code, the owner of, who has the vulnerability, know about it. Give them a reasonable amount of time to get a fix out there, so that by the time this thing goes public or is announced publicly, there is a fix in place, and these newly announced vulnerabilities are not exploited.
Yep.
Now, a lot of funny thing happened on the way to the market, right? A lot of companies would stick their head in the sand when told about vulnerabilities.
Yes.
And refuse to do anything, and they give 1,000,001 excuses.
That's why the term responsible disclosure has been dropped from a lot of the common discourse, and we've turned to the term coordinated vulnerability disclosure, because the researchers are saying, a lot of maintainers are saying, well, it's responsible if you disclose to us, and we're not going to give any information out. And the researchers like, no, that's not responsible. And so there's this whole, the word responsibility and ethics.
It's semantics. Yeah, absolutely.
So coordinated vulnerability disclosure is the idea that researchers will come and say, here's a vulnerability, here's a deadline that I'm going to disclose by. We should have a fix out by then, please. If you don't, okay, it's going to go public. If you want to protect your users, this is you should work with me within this time frame. And that has had Google Project Zero has a lot of statistics around that. When you have a fixed deadline for coordinated vulnerability disclosure, that it actually has a very positive impact around getting fixes done in a very condensed amount of time and actually getting those out to users.
But that being said, there are, certain situations where they just can't get the fix done in time, and they'll work with the researcher and say, okay, we're going to wait 120 days instead of 90 or whatever it is, to give them time to get it out and get it out to the channel, so to speak. And then of course there's the announcement of it. And the good news is over the years this has become a little bit more, I don't want to say codified, but
normalized, which is
more
good.
Normalized.
It's healthy to be normalized. You run into a lot of bug bounty programs and a lot of vulnerability disclosure programs that still have NDAs associated with them, where they say, if you disclose to our program, you're not allowed to disclose unless you get permission from us. And that's been a difficulty, and that's one of the things that I am warning people about in this guide is, if you're engaged in a vulnerability disclosure program or a bug bounty program where you found a vulnerability, like a lot of the times I find vulnerabilities unintentionally or intentionally, but there are a lot of bug bounty researchers or bug bounty hackers that look for programs that have money to do the disclosure, right? Yep. I'm going the other way. I'm looking for vulnerabilities and then saying, I found a vulnerability, here it is, right? But when you run into these programs, a lot of them have non-disclosure agreements, and you have to get agreement from the maintainer to disclose, and you have to be really careful about that, because a lot of the times when I'm looking at vulnerabilities in open source software, you need a CVE number, you need disclosure, and so you have to articulate that potentially beforehand. You have to say to the person, hey, I'm not going to disclose this vulnerability to you under these terms. First, you need to waive these terms for me before I'm willing to give you the details of the vulnerability, because you can set yourself up for potential legal issues, or if you're on Bugcrowd or HackerOne, you can potentially get thrown off the platform, which means that you can't make money off of other research that you're doing potentially. So there's a lot of pitfalls, and so communicating those pitfalls in these guides to make sure that people are making an informed decision about how they're doing vulnerability disclosure.
Let me just play devil's advocate.
Yes.
So the flip side of this is, if you speak to many maintainers and you say, hey man, what's the deal? The researcher found the bug. Fix it.
Yep.
You got 90 days. That's an eternity. Fix it.
Yep.
Their comeback to you is, well, he only really gave us, or they only gave us 45 days, or they threatened unless we give them an exorbitant amount of money, or
that's extortion. That's not legal.
That's called extortion. Yes, and that's in a nice way what they're saying, or this security researcher is so publicity hounded that they just want to get it out there to get their name with it. They don't care about the security implications involved in doing the responsible disclosure or coordinated disclosure.
Yep.
So, Jonathan's presenting the security researcher side, but all I'm saying is, how life is. I've lived long enough to know that there's always a million sides to every story. There's the black, the white, and the gray, and there's a lot of gray in between.
Yep.
But the good news is, as we sit here today, it's a lot better than it
absolutely.
was when
Yeah.
I was coming up in
I mean, I've heard a lot of the stories from previous companies, and you do any security research and you just get chased by lawyers, right? Microsoft, everybody, they were really, really bad about that in the past, and it has got significantly more normalized now. The DOJ.
Well, security researching
Yes.
in general, security research is when, you were either a black hat, doing it for nefarious purposes, or you were a white hat. People were saying, "What the hell are you doing for a living?"
Yeah.
Right? What are you making money at? And so now
you can make a lot more money as a
Right.
doing stuff for the good stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
you could be a white hat security researcher and make a living, and
Yep.
and it's thanks to Dan and people like that who made that
He had
possible.
a line. Watching one of his talks, he's talking about research and stuff like that, and he's like, "Can my hat be any more white?"
Yeah,
it's
Well,
he really
was one of the good
exemplified it.
guys with it. I mean, because back then, with the DNS thing, he literally had to go out to all these vendors and say, "Please, please, please."
He said, I think he said, I went to the DEF CON group held a funeral for him, and somebody told a story about, he's like somebody asked him, what would you do if you found another one of those types of vulnerabilities? He said, I hope I never do, because it was so much work, right? Because he did not that he would have done the work again, I think, but he was like,
the internet was broke.
well, but yeah, he felt a moral obligation to do that work.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I just hope I don't find another one like that, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do that sort of coordination and
Though I think it would be easier today than it was.
Oh, absolutely. I think
he
so.
did it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that I could be wrong, but it was back in 2008. There was still CERT and a lot of those things were either didn't exist or were very early in their maturity and stuff like that.
Was it 08? I think it might have been earlier.
It was around 08.
I want to feel all right.
Yeah.
I'm still secure.
That was when
07, 08.
DEF CON, I think that was the year, I could be completely wrong. I think it was around 08. Yeah.
It's around, Still Secure is a company I co-founded. I left in 08, 09 after DEF CON that summer.
Yeah.
So it was around then.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to go back to what you're doing with Linux Foundation. That
Yes.
you're working with a bunch of folks and orgs.
Yeah.
Tell them a little bit.
So primarily the work that I'm attending a lot of the different meetings. The other interesting discussions that are going on, I've been particularly passionate about security of repositories, the repository security. I formerly worked for Gradle, and Gradle is a build tool used to build 50% of all Java applications and 99% of all Android applications. So if you have an Android device, you are
Gradle.
you're not running Gradle, but your app's on the app that's running on your phone got there because Gradle was used to build it. So and so I've been very passionate about the security of the supply chain and vulnerabilities in that area. And I've been kind of hoping for a group to come together to discuss the security and the risks and the hopefully long-term sharing threat intel around these things in this space. And so I'm really glad to see that there's finally a grounding rod, a place for a community circle for these conversations to finally come together and have discussions around, what are the things that we're doing to secure these things? What are the controls that we can put into place to protect our end users and protect the supply chain that is feeding, multi-billion-dollar companies and small projects, right? How do we protect this stuff, right? And Gradle is used to build Signal, right, which is a very important security app, right?
Absolutely.
How do we protect all these things? And so I'm really glad to see that these conversations are finally happening.
Yeah, no, it's a long time coming.
Yeah.
Anyway, hey Jonathan, we're probably way over time, and I know you're supposed to get lunch.
At lunch, yeah.
I'm gonna let you go eat. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you
Dan
very
would
much.
be proud.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work and stay in touch.
Will do. Thank you so much.
All right, we're taking a break. We're live in Austin. We'll be back in a moment.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
We had a fantastic set of interviews with some great guests to let you know what's up in the tech world. And alongside our airing of the new show, Techstrong Research Review, as well as Engineering the Change, we had some fantastic content today. We'll be back again on Monday, so we hope to see you then. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.